Welcome everybody to our November 21st regular council meeting for the city of Courtenay. And just like to start by respectfully acknowledging that the lands on which this meeting is being conducted is the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. And we appreciate them for welcoming us here. I want to start by saying November is Adoption Awareness Month. Adoptive families in British Columbia provide children with the love and support as permanent members of their family and offer children the stability and foundation to build the lives they dream of while staying connected to their community and culture. So just really want to thank the adoptive families that are out there that really make our village that much better. Also want to make a special comment here. The 2022 Tour de Rock, we had Steve Scott, a Courtenay Fire Department volunteer and an employee of the city, represent the Comox Valley on the 2022 Tour de Rock event. The Tour de Rock is a 2-week, 1,200-kilometer bike ride comprised of first responders and community riders raising money for children and families affected by pediatric cancer. The annual trek down to Vancouver Island is in its 25th year, and Steve Scott has raised more than $18,000 for this event. So I just want to raise a hand to Steve. And I have a presentation for Steve, if Steve would like to come up.
23,000.
Well, I stand corrected. You'll have to come to the front there. My apologies. I was going to run around real quick, but I'm going to amend my announcement there. So $23,000, just an amazing amount. Thanks so much. And if you walk right in front here, that you can look at the screen there, and it's all. Very cool. Thank you.
Written it before and kind of got encouraged to do so. Yeah, it opened my eyes a lot, and I had like I said, a good team to support me. So, and the weather, you know, we had the weather. Couldn't ask for better weather. So
Fantastic. Well, some flowers. Have yourself a great night.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. And thanks to staff for arranging all that stuff and wrangling me a little bit. And we'll be that much more prepared for the next time. And again, just a huge kudos to the amazing people in our community. And Steve's a shining example of that. We're going to amend our agenda a little bit. So under introduction of late items, we're going to add a notice of motion that's going to happen at the end under at the very end of the meeting, I believe. Oh, yeah, exactly. So after unfinished business. And then we've got the, we're going to actually remove item 12.2.1. And that was the one that I mentioned in the public hearing. And we'll defer that to our next council meeting. Does anybody object to those two amendments? 12.21, the one on Piercy Avenue. It should come up probably at our next council meeting, but it's going to go back to staff. So,
yeah, just so people know, because they were probably really interested, right?
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Mr. Garber.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Frisch's question, my understanding would be December 12th, which is our next last meeting of the calendar year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Excellent question. And the notice of motion will be coming forward from Councillor Jolicoeur as well, just so we're aware. And with that, we'll move into adoption of minutes, and we have from November 7th and November 8th. If somebody would like to move those. And are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, we'll receive them as unanimously approved. And next we'll move on to presentations, and our first presentation is from the Courtenay RCMP. Inspector Kerber's our officer in charge, and we will pass it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself and Staff Sergeant Beauregard here. And if we can get the presentation up that was sent over.
We're nearly there. I think it just got moved around because we rejigged our agenda a bit to get you first. There we go. It's coming up.
All right. Perfect. Thank you very much. And I'll kind of prompt you to move the screens down. So this is a report to council for November 2022. It incorporates, just go to the next slide, please. So it's going to be calls for service, so and then crime stats by type and provincial tactical enforcement priority, which is our prolific offenders. So next slide, please. So here you see Courtenay in red, which is the top graph. Below that, you see Comox, Cumberland, and the rural areas, or provincial, which is Merville, Black Creek, and all that. So a lot of calls for service are going to the city of Courtenay by this graph. So based on the calls for service in Courtenay for 219, 220, 221, Courtenay is a community in the Comox Valley jurisdiction that draws the highest calls for service from us. And in reality, that is 71.8% of the calls for service for out of 100% that Courtenay gets calls for. And that relates to a lot of resources going to calls for service in the Courtenay area. Next slide, please. This next slide will kind of explain it a little bit better. You can see Courtenay in red, and then Comox, Cumberland, and rural. 74% there is the calls for service, and then 48.3 is the regular members that are assigned to positions in Courtenay. So of the detachment, 29 positions belong to Courtenay with appropriate PSC staff attached to that as well. So next slide. You can see clearly here the calls for service. The dark blue is the 2019. If you go to the gray, which is what this fiscal year, we're well over 12,000 calls for service for the Courtenay area as compared to Comox, which is at 2,000. Cumberland is a lot less, and then the rural areas is actually more than Cumberland. So that is a comparative of what the calls for service have and what areas we would send to. So we'll go to the next slide, and then we'll break it down into crime types. So for traffic calls, again, the dark gray is this year, and then it goes back to 2019. Last year was a busy year. This year, our files actually down a little bit, which is relatively, you can see by the graphs for the traffic calls. And then next slide. Impaired drivers, again, we are very good at getting impaired drivers off the road. We have a lot of members that are trained in FSST, which is kind of sobriety field testing operations, and then we have drug recognition experts as well. So that kind of counts to the file count. So again, for the fiscal year, and that goes to September, we're well over 200 impaired drivers that have got like an automatic vehicle impound or an actual criminal code investigation for impaired. Next slide. Break and enters, again, here's the relative. Break and enters have gone down this year quite a bit, but it's still significant as compared to the other communities. Again, the gray is for Courtenay. Next slide. Auto theft. Again, you'll see a pattern here that a lot of the calls for service are for Courtenay, and the other communities are a little bit less. So and then theft from vehicle. Next slide, please. Again, you can see the relative calls for service to the different communities. Courtney, for vehicle theft are well over 250 for the fiscal year to date. Next slide. Drug trafficking. 2019 saw a lot of that. This year it's gone down. And I can say that that's because a lot of the people we've incarcerated and other methods of crime reduction. So that's gone down. So we're doing a very good job in that area. Next slide, please. So that's gone up significantly this year. And I can't give you a real reason why that happens. It depends on the year and what kind of files we generate. So this year it's gone up past 40, up to 45 sex assault files. Next slide, please. Again, family, partner, spouse. So these are domestics. These are quite prevalent in the community, and we have our domestic violence unit quite busy doing a lot of intervention and a lot of follow-up with members and files. And our PTEP, which is our provincial threat targeted enforcement, and these are our prolific offenders. So we've had some good success with a major player in the community that we've been able to arrest and work on. That is a constant. We do that routinely. We have our targets, our PTEP targets, pardon me. That's done provincially. That is a prolific offenders and our drug dealers. So we try and work on those as best we can. And we've had pretty good success with that. And that's the end of the slide. Now I can open it up for questions.
All right, thanks very much. Are there any councillors that would like to ask questions of Inspector Curvers? Councillor McCollum.
Thanks. I just had a question about the impaired driving slide. I assume that that's representative of where the vehicles are pulled over, not where the drivers reside. Could you clarify that for us, please?
That's correct. Yeah, so it's where the actual what we call the officer violator contact happens, and that's where the file will be generated. Let's say if it's on Cliff Ave, but they live in a rural community, well, that file is going to be generated for Courtney.
Okay.
And that would be for all of those graphs that we saw today.
Yes.
But great question. Thanks.
Well, maybe not necessarily, not for all the graphs, because a lot of them are generated, for example, in the case of like theft from auto or break and enters, those will be generated
In-house.
physical evidence or physical residence of where that person resides, right?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. Councillor Jolicoeur.
In the report that we've received, it wasn't in the slides, but you have a month-by-month breakdown. And I'm wondering, the numbers that are under each month, is that new active files that month, or is that year to date?
So if you look at calls for service, so that'd be, if you look at the last one, that's for September, there was 1,482 calls for service that month.
It's in the Courtney jurisdiction.
In your jurisdiction, yes. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions? Oh, yeah.
Sorry, calls for service can be from A to Z, to a simple neighborhood dispute where, you know, a tree branch gets cut over a fence and there's a couple neighbors that are upset with each other. So we respond to those things, to the more serious ones. And I want to reiterate the priority calls. So priority 1 to 4, we deal with those on a regular basis, and that includes all those calls for service. So priority 1s and 2s will get immediate action. 3s and 4s will have to wait in our queue till someone can get to them.
Thanks for that. And Councillor, I'll get to it yet. We'll call Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Inspector Curvers. I just had a small question in in the report, it gives comparisons of second quarter 2022 to second quarter 2021. Is that a typo? Because like we're
No,
obviously
it's just the stats. We're trying to do year by year analysis. So you can see the difference from what 1 year is compared to the next year.
I understand that, but given that we've now got the third quarter is what you're presenting to us, the third quarter data, I was wondering.
No, this is second quarter data. Third quarter for us isn't finished till January.
Okay, you're not on a calendar year or in a fiscal year. Okay, that's.
Yeah, we go April to April.
I was thinking calendar year. Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, sir. Councillor Cole Hamilton for the question, and Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, excuse me. Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Inspector, for the report. I was just, obviously looking at the numbers in Courtenay, they're considerably higher than other municipalities in the valley. I would assume that's because everyone goes through Courtenay and hangs out in Courtenay. But I guess I'm wondering, have you compared like East Courtenay to West Courtenay? Like if you're on Lerwick, is there just a lot more crime on one side than on Guthrie or whatever?
No, we haven't done that, but typically our analysts will give us kind of hotspots of where the crime areas are for like theft from vehicles and P&Es, and we can easily get those stats to give you kind of a comparison from east to west.
Yeah, well, because like I think the theft from vehicles is interesting. Are you more likely to get broken into in Courtenay and East Courtenay than in Comox or in West Courtenay? I would be interested in knowing that. I suspect that downtown Courtenay, being a hub of activity, is going to have more of that sort of crime. So
we could definitely get the stats for that.
Or maybe they just really love Courtenay residents when they want to break into cars, right? We got better stuff in our cars or something. Thanks.
Excellent. Any further questions from council? Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor, and Inspector Curvers. We have a number of people from downtown businesses in the gallery tonight, and they'd probably be interested to hear what sort of efforts are being made to address criminal behavior in our downtown. Maybe you can comment on that. Any meetings that are taking place with downtown business, any street patrols or bike patrols that are active at this time of year?
Our bike unit is active downtown routinely when they're on shift, of course, and they're downtown. They're down there all the time, doing patrols, dealing with the community and the homeless population, trying to get them proper care. The warming center, they're there all the time. They do the different patrols in different areas. So yes, I'm going to say that they're there quite regularly.
And attending meetings with the appropriate service groups in the community, and the members of the BIA will be very familiar with those members, the bike unit.
So yeah, they're tasked with the different groups and our partners in the community, and they kind of go to the meetings and kind of give them updates on what we're doing and what they can do for them.
Hey, can you let us know if there's any increase or decrease in the number of thefts from downtown businesses or acts of vandalism to their properties and that type of thing?
Yeah, we can certainly do that. That'll be a different analysis we have to do, but we can definitely do that and get that for you.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful to know. Thanks very much.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Hillian. And next we have Councillor Frisch.
Oh, did you want to go first? No, thanks for that opportunity to speak again. I also thought of the work I do in the Junction Community Advisory Committee, and the railroad tracks are often a point of issue there, with people maybe lighting fires or hanging out with. I'm sure there are lots of nice dogs, but there are also dogs that seem a little aggressive. And I'm wondering if the police have experience with dealing with these matters, if they can update us on sort of their idea on how to help us keep those areas, healthy and happy and nice places to visit, especially on the railroad track there.
Yeah, Constable Curtis has recently had a meeting with the Inland Quarter. I'm probably saying the name wrong. But they're trying to get to some meetings and find up some action plans to kind of work on those railroad tracks and those pass through there.
Yeah,
last week we did have a meeting with Crown Council, specifically in relation to those sort of trespass issues, mischief, things of those nature that are being reported in that sort of area. So certainly we're live to it and coming up with strategies to deal with it, but like you've alluded to, sort of all hands on deck when it comes to semi-private property with public access. It makes it a little bit troublesome, but yeah, we definitely want to make that a safe environment for everybody.
Well, I appreciate the response, and my initial thought is it's around a community building, and maybe just having patrols in those areas in the evenings might also be helpful. I obviously don't know what it means to send police out staffing in the middle of the night on pathways, but perhaps it's an option. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch, and Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Oh boy, I might not be able to do it. I was really hoping for my voice back. Maybe others weren't, but interesting, the last comment about talking to Crown Council about the trespass issue. It really is a complicated situation because, of course, many people who are out there trespassing don't have anywhere to go. But I wanted to bring up the drug enforcement piece and the drug deal. And the numbers were quite down in terms of those arrests. And that also brings me to the point that in other communities, when I guess there's a crackdown on the dealers, we often do see more harms to people who use substances because there is no safe supply for those folks. And I was curious, in terms of those arrests, are these sort of more higher level dealers? I did note that one of the examples you gave was for a violent drug dealer, which I think is really appropriate to get that person out of commission. But I was curious if you could say what kind of arrests are happening. And then my other question is about the removal of criminal penalties for people who possess a small amount coming up in January. And if you've had any correspondence with your provincial counterparts on how you're going to deal with that, or anything that you can tell us about that. Thank you.
So for the drug enforcement, that we try and deal with it at a street level first, and we try and work that through. So if we have a project and we see handoffs and transactions, we try and action that right away. So we have some quick responses to the drug issue. If we bear some good information or evidence from that, we can notch it up to make a project out of it and work the medium level drug dealer in the community. A lot of the lines that are supplied are coming from out of town, and they're the big, Mr. Big, I'm going to say. So for our purposes, we try and target the street level and the prolific offenders and the priority offenders and kind of work it up from there.
So the targeting is of the drug traffickers, not of the end user.
Yeah.
Yeah. That clarifies that, Councillor Moore.
And further, speaking further to your other question about the upcoming decriminalization of January 31st, that's a discussion we'll have to have, I think, further amongst ourselves and the council members. We have received further information as recently as this afternoon from the provincial side, and something we'll have to discuss in the upcoming months leading up to that, I think, as a community response.
Right, thank you. So the street level would be not necessarily people who are struggling and are, not kind of the big dealers that are targeting people. But yeah, I guess I'm just concerned that someone who is not able to, obviously it's illegal, it's a crime at this point. But in lieu of people getting a substance that's clean and safe, it does create a potential issue as well with those lower level folks. I'm thinking of the people who are struggling with their own addiction, not talking about the ones that come in with their Mercedes and drop off supply. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Any further questions or comments from council? Well, I really do appreciate the presentation today and want to just comment. Troy and I actually, well, I think we've had a couple of meetings recently together, but just really want to speak to the RCMP's willingness to meet with the groups, which you alluded to earlier. We just met last week with a security group for an area town, and really pushing those conversations. And I think one thing that I'll reiterate that Inspector Curvers has really impressed upon myself, and in fact, I think it's what's helped us close down some nuisance houses in our community. And that's just making sure that when people see something, somebody breaking the law or something that's whether it's a theft or whatever, that they do call in and they do report it, just so that information is recorded and can be followed up on. So with that, I'll thank you guys for your presentation today and let you get on with your evening.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. And any questions or comments regarding the quarterly report? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. And our next delegation is the Arden Green team. If you'd like to approach the podium.
Sweet. Okay. On. Good.
Microphone, is it on?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having us today and audience members for joining us. We would first like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox people, the traditional keepers of the land. We would like to thank them for the privilege of living on the land and the gift of working with their children. My name is Michelle Hennisat. I am a kindergarten grade 1 teacher at Arden Elementary, as well as a parent of 2 Arden students, one of whom has recently moved on to Lake Trail.
I'm Jessie Sheridan Bush, a fellow Arden parent and teacher on call in the district.
Together, we founded the Arden Green team as a result of our participation in the province's active school travel pilot program, which is funded by the Ministry of Transportation, whom we received a grant from. We'd like to share with you today that we have learned about our school community in the context of active school travel.
We'll also share where we believe our schools' needs overlap with those with Council's goals to ensure the safety and well-being of students on their ways to and from school.
Arden is a very diverse and culturally rich community-minded school. We are a K-5 school with 242 students, a third of whom are Indigenous learners. Our catchment spans an almost 5-kilometer radius, including neighborhoods that range from urban to rural.
Most of the roads in our catchment are long, narrow roads that have little to no shoulder on either side, making the increased vehicle traffic over the years a major concern and barrier to active transportation for families in our catchment.
To inform our programming, we created an equitable family survey and received an almost 90% response rate from Arden families.
As you can see, we learned that the vast majority of our population are currently driven to school in single occupancy vehicles, and nearly half of our students don't engage in active transportation at all.
This chart highlights the reasons why children are driven to school, with the pink and beige bars representing major safety concerns. These families also said that they would engage in active school travel more often if there were improved sidewalks,
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, we missed the little part to screen share, so.
Oh, yeah.
But it's back on now.
Okay. These families also said they would engage in active school travel more if there were improved sidewalks, crossings, and traffic calming measures.
Before.
Oh, you have to click on-
Sorry, we're just trying to show the last graph there. As you can see, Lake Trail Road, where our school zone is located, is the area of greatest concern regarding safety for our school community.
We invited community stakeholders to participate in a neighborhood walkabout and safety audit to take a closer look at our school zone. We want to thank the counselors who joined us and all those from the community that were present again for the rich discussion that informs our recommendations for today.
The resounding message from our walkabout was clear. Our school zone does not feel visible enough to drivers. The RCMP were very concerned with the speeding observed on our walkabout and how little this stretch of Lake Trail feels like a school zone.
Since the safety audit, we have organized a variety of events and programs encouraging active school travel and supporting families to use safer routes to school. We are hoping we have enough time at the end to share a video that illustrates the ripple effect that our efforts are having on the community.
And we're now going to outline our top 5 requests for council today for safety measures that are informed by evidence-based research.
If council could only fulfill one of our requests from today, we ask that it be the installation of speed humps in our school zone. Our safety audit found that too many vehicles are driving too fast through our school zone during peak times. Speed humps have been the most requested infrastructure improvements by our Arden families.
Speed humps are shown to reduce driver speeds more than all our other requested measures combined. They are the bold reminder that drivers need to slow down in our school zone. Therefore, we believe speed humps are the most crucial piece of infrastructure to prioritize the safety of our most vulnerable road users.
Our second ask is a lower speed limit between Lake Trail Community School and Arden Elementary to 30 kilometers per hour. This is a simple and inexpensive measure to reduce speeds of vehicles approaching our school zone. A study accessing the speed and safety effects of reducing speed limits from 50 to 30 kilometers actually reveals that fatal injury collisions were significantly reduced by 45%, and injuries to vulnerable road users such as children were reduced by 55%.
We are also asking that our school zone be extended a bit on both sides along Lake Trail Road, and as well for school pavement markings to be painted at each end to further increase visibility and awareness for drivers as they enter our school zone. The current sign for eastbound traffic is placed halfway down a hill, giving no warning of the school zone before cresting the hill, as they then fight gravity to slow down to the 30 kilometers an hour. Particularly worrisome is how children traveling along the south side shoulder currently have traffic approaching them blindly at 50 kilometers an hour. We are asking that this school zone sign be relocated above the hill to mitigate these hazards.
For westbound traffic, we would like to see the school zone extended east of Powerhouse Road. This would ensure that traffic will have slowed to 30 kilometers before drivers encounter children at the tight corners of Lake Trail and Powerhouse. And on the map there, you can see the current location in red and the requested location on the arrows in yellow.
A permanently installed speed reader board like this solar powered one attached to the school zone sign at Arrowview Elementary in Qualicum Beach is another measure we are requesting. Speed reader boards have been shown to reduce speeds in school zones, and particularly in locations where excessive speeding is an issue like along Lake Trail Road.
Our final request is for raised crosswalks across Powerhouse and Webb at the intersections of Lake Trail. During the safety audit, we acknowledged the immense impact that council's proposed pathway on the north side of Lake Trail Road will have on safety in keeping pedestrians and vehicles farther apart. However, we feel the increase in pedestrian traffic that the proposed pathway will bring to these tight intersections warrants this additional improvement.
These 5 requests are intended to work together to complement each other, much like the efforts of our school community. None of these measures alone are enough to ensure the safety of our most vulnerable road users.
We sincerely hope Council will commit to providing these crucial infrastructure improvements for students and the entire community, really, because ultimately without safe school travel, there is no active school travel.
We thank you for your time today and consideration of these important requests, and would like to finish off by sharing these ardent voices and the ripple effect we're seeing in our community through our efforts thus far.
You need to click.
Don't know if we can play the video.
Right. It's a 5-minute long video. Okay, because we're 2 minutes.
That's okay, we can.
Till the
Why we put it at the end.
I think I'm getting some nods from council that we'll let it go. So
That's why we put it at the end.
absolutely.
We welcome any questions you may have about our requests and what we've shared today. Thanks
Thank
for your time.
Thanks so much. Are there any councillors that have any questions or comments? Councillor Frisch. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hillian got in right before you, so.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a brief comment. As you probably know, we won't make any decision on your presentation tonight. We'll have to talk to our staff about the various recommendations and how doable they are and in what sort of time frame. So thanks very much for being here. Appreciate it.
We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian and Councillor Frisch. I'll get to know the new numbers soon.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, in that vein, I mean, we haven't even done strategic priorities yet. And it leads to a much bigger question for all the schools, of course, in the area who probably would benefit from a lot of the same things. I only have one question about the speed humps and wondering if you had considered lane narrowing as well, because it's very popular. And you guys must live in the area, so you've obviously welcomed the idea of speed humps on the road, even when school's not in session. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I would say the BC, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but there's the toolkit for different measures. And for us, with the present nature of Lake Trail, the numbers felt like they spoke for themselves in terms of what the speed hump, how much the speed humps could reduce speeding on Lake Trail Road in relation to what the stats said for narrowing, but we're not opposed to it.
Yeah, fair enough. And of course, you're also aware of the pathway that we're working on getting funding for. Thanks so much.
Very excited.
Aware and extremely pleased.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch and Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, just wanted to take a moment to thank you and your team and all the families and the parents in the school for prioritizing this and doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us and getting us this information. And also just a congratulations for such a positive turnout in the survey. People are quite taxed with surveys and being asked of things. And I think it really demonstrates the priority that this is for the families that have children that attend these schools, that there is over 90% turnout for the survey. So thank you again for the team.
Thank you. Thanks. We did our best to make the survey as accessible as possible too. It was online, it was available in paper, and we did have some staff phoning some of our more vulnerable families to make sure that we got an equitable response.
Excellent. Thanks very much. I don't see any further questions or comments, but I think your message is really well received here. It obviously, as Councillor Frisch has mentioned, you know, it kind of dovetails, I think, with what we're talking about with the pathway. It's been 6 or 7 years since the Ardent Ambassadors came and presented to us. Hopefully they haven't graduated yet. We'd like to at least get that pathway in before then. We're just waiting for some grant funding, and hopefully we'll be moving forward with that shortly. That being said, again, thanks so much for your presentation tonight.
Many of the Ardent Ambassadors are actually at Lake Trail still, so you would still be helping them in some of these measures. It's really is a school zone from Lake Trail to Ardent. So thanks for your time today, and thanks again to the councillors who came out to our safety audit. We really appreciated your time and recommendations.
Thank you.
All right, all those in favor? It's that passes unanimously, so we'll receive the information. Excellent. Awesome. And next we have the Downtown Business Improvement Area, DCBIA bylaw 2264. And I believe we have Tracy, but I'm not sure who's with you, so I'm going to let you introduce yourselves, if that's all right. Yep. Oh, the clicker. Did the clicker get left there?
We've got it, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, we'll get the PowerPoint up and yep.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much for having us. We're here today to talk about the Downtown Courtenay Business
Maybe
Improvement
move the mic just
Association.
towards you, just so you're.
We're here today to talk about the Downtown Courtenay Business Improvement Association. We're currently doing a bylaw review project. And I'd like to introduce myself, Tracy Clark, Executive Director of the BIA. And I have Sydney Rankmore here. She's from Urban Systems. Today we'll be talking about what the BIA does, the review project, are our initial findings. We have some proposed recommendations coming for you. Today, we don't have an ask, but we do appreciate the opportunity to keep you updated. In 1995, the city of Courtenay established the DCBIA by bylaw, and it has served the community for 27 years. We currently represent about 200 small business members. We have 1 part-time staff, and we have a volunteer board of directors currently with 10 people sitting on our board. Since the inception of the BIA in 1995, we have operated with a budget of $60,000. At that time, it was an appropriate amount. However, with no regular increase over time, the operating budget has not kept up with inflation. The cost of services is no longer adequate to serve the business community. With that being said, we do feel we have been successful in providing a wide range of services over the years. Because of your close involvement at City, we feel you're familiar with these initiatives, so we'll briefly discuss some of our success measures that we've done. We have a few committees that our volunteer board of directors sits on. It's a working board, and we work on safety, security, marketing, infrastructure, and events. We'll find the hidden slide. That's the one. One of the things that guides the work that we do at the DCBIA is the Downtown Courtenay Playbook. This was written in 2016, and as a partner in its implementation, we're now able to look back and check off quite a few of the action items of this document. We have established 4th, 5th, and 6th Street characters. We have established a downtown working group, and we maintain regular communications with public works, planning, and arts and culture organizations. We are developing a communication strategy, and we have a website that we created in 2019 that has an outward focus of economic development and tourism for downtown Courtenay. We also do special events downtown that we're super proud of. We have 3 main events hosted throughout the year, and we have a growing number of third-party events. People are coming to downtown Courtenay to host their events because it is the heart of Courtenay. We also focus on business recruitment and retention, and we're happy to see the sidewalk patios growing as a way for our restaurant partners to increase their revenue in these troubling times. We are always reflecting on our work, and we are looking at ways to improve our offerings. That brings us to this project. Since the bylaw hasn't been updated in 20 years, we identified a number of challenges that are related to our limited operating budget, which include challenges with staff retention. For example, I am the 4th executive director in the last 5 years. With our staff being part-time, we also have just a limited capacity to serve our members. And we also have limited resources that we can offer to our businesses. So this project's objective is to update the DCBIA bylaw so we can better serve the downtown Courtenay business community. And we have been conducting review service offerings. We are reviewing our operating budget and financials, and we're reviewing the boundaries to see if they encompass what is considered as the whole of downtown Courtenay. Before making any changes, we are taking a really good look at what we're doing. We're consulting stakeholders and other BIAs. And to talk about that work that's been undertaken, I'd like to hand over the mic to Sydney from Urban Systems.
Hello. So it was a 3-phase project, or it has been a 3-phase project. So phase 1, we were reviewing existing documents and processes such as meeting minutes, the current bylaw, etc. We were looking at best practices from other successful BIAs from across Canada. We looked at comparable communities, similar sized communities with BIAs to see what they're doing. And we've done some interviews with industry experts, so other executive directors from BIAs, people from BC BIA, that kind of thing. And we also had a meeting with city staff back in August. For phase 2, this is where we got into our outreach and engagement to engage with the downtown business community. So we set up a booth at market days to chat with local business owners and the general public to just let them know about what the project was about. We disseminated a survey. We had various social media posts. There's currently a window display in the Hot Chocolates storefront. You may have seen it with some info about the BIA operations and a public mapping activity, which we had a lot more uptake on than we were expecting, which really shows that the public really does care about what happens in downtown Courtenay. We had a newspaper article. We've done mail outs to non-member businesses and members and all property owners. We've gone door to door with handouts. Some people have reached out for more in-depth conversations. And we had a board of directors workshop back in October to kind of dig deeper into some of the proposed changes. So we're at phase 3, started phase 3 now. So we're reporting back. We're compiling the survey results. Last week, we had an information session with downtown business members, not just members, but prospective members as well. We have this presentation to you all, and then we will compile a recommendations report prior to the bylaw update. So I'm going to dig deeper into kind of some of the research and analysis we've been doing through this process. Oh, struggling with this. So we did a best practices from comparable communities review. We compiled a list of 10 BIAs of similar size and similar context, while thinking also of variety. For this purpose of this presentation, we've just shown 6. So membership kind of ranges from 80 to 400 businesses. So we calculated the dollar amount allocated per member business just to give us a sense of how Courtenay compares. So that's the annual operating budget divided by the number of members to show how much money is available to serve each business. Obviously, it doesn't really work this way. It's just kind of an average to give us a sense of where Courtenay stands. As you can see, Courtenay is quite a bit lower than the other BIAs, and also does not have an annual levy increase to keep up with inflation. So the best practices we found were an annual levy increase. And when we averaged out the 10 BIAs that we looked at, about 3% was kind of the average. We also noticed that regular bylaw renewals every 5 to 8 years, not waiting 20 years, is kind of best practice. So it's not a huge undertaking. It's also best practice to have well-paid and full-time staff. Successful BIAs tend to cover a larger geographic area, and successful BIAs have the support from the municipality, either financial or otherwise. So we conducted a mapping analysis as well to kind of look at possible boundary expansions. And we looked at various city documents to see what the city kind of considers as downtown Courtenay. So the yellow line is the City of Courtenay zoning bylaw, which shows commercial use and public use zoning. And the red line shows the OCP downtown center and land use designation. The blue line is the downtown Courtenay parking map. And the purple is the downtown Courtenay playbook. So we kind of wanted to overlay all of these to get a sense of, is there like a natural boundary forming? And you can kind of see a lot of the lines overlay. And we took a little bit closer of a look at the zoning bylaw, because of course the tax can only be applied to commercial properties and light industrial. So the purple is the commercial properties. So again, you can kind of see a natural boundary forming. The red is the existing boundary. So now we'll get into kind of some of our findings from the outreach. This is mostly from the survey, but we did look at another, like I mentioned earlier, there's quite a number of ways we've been outreaching with downtown businesses. So we've received 51 responses to date. We won't close the survey until the end of December, so we're going to keep pushing it as much as we can. And again, these are just kind of preliminary responses, and they're both current members and prospective members. So those are businesses kind of in the downtown area, but not currently part of the BIA. So we asked members if an increase in taxes would impact their decision to remain within the BIA. 83% said no, so that's a good sign. I'm going to move through these kind of quickly because we know we have limited time. We asked current members if they would be supportive of a boundary expansion to include more businesses. And we saw the majority were either highly supportive or somewhat supportive. We asked members if they would support an annual increase in budget. So that 3% we kind of talked about. And the majority were supportive again, either highly or somewhat. We asked members what percentage they would be supportive, and they were generally in the 2 to 4% range. So that's right around the average. And then we asked people to rank which service areas were their highest priorities. So 39% of respondents answered that marketing and promotions, their number one priority. Kind of moving through this a little bit quickly, but so this will help kind of later in the budgeting stage in the spring when the BIA goes through that process. And I'll move on to non-members. So for non-members, we asked how well do you understand what the BIA does? And we were kind of getting not at all or not very well or somewhat well. So that was really indicative that the BIA needs to kind of do a little more outreach to really explain what services they can offer. We then asked, maybe you should take control of this. Just one more. Oh, back one. Thank you. That would be maybe better. I'm struggling with that.
You can pantomime when you want.
There we go. So just one back would be great. Thank you. So then we asked non-members, would you support a boundary expansion to include your business? And 73% said yes. So it's a good sign as well. You can go to the next one. We also asked them if the boundary was expansion, what would be their target priorities to rank from 1 to 4. And 44% said beautification and revitalization, which is a real indication that the BIA and the city's doing a good job beautifying the downtown Courtenay business improvement area with all the wayfinding and signage and that kind of thing. We'll go to the next one. And we also asked in this survey, what do you consider downtown Courtenay? Just to see if there was kind of consistency in where people were thinking. And it does, if you can kind of see, it does start to align with some of the city documents, and there is kind of a concentration in one area. You can go to the next one. So from all this, we've come up with some preliminary recommendations and proposed changes. Again, very preliminary because we're still waiting on survey results to come in and still doing some engagement. So for targeted services with an increased budget, the BIA would prioritize having full-time staff, some administrative support, so maybe events, social media, bookkeeping, a governance board, so moving away from volunteer, marketing to support businesses, safety initiatives, more events, and in the event of a boundary expansion, more beautification and revitalization in the expansion areas. So for the proposed annual operating budget, we're proposing a budget range between $90,000 and $180,000, depending on the boundary expansion. Seems like a large range, but we'll go to the next one. So without a boundary expansion, we would propose $90,000 for the current 200 businesses with a 3% yearly increase to keep up with inflation. So that's about a 33% increase from current rates. And then with the boundary expansion, you would double it because it would add an extra 200 businesses. So it would be $180,000 with a 3% yearly increase. Now, again, these are just kind of proposals that we're bringing to the business community to see what they think, to see if it aligns with what they're thinking. So nothing set in stone at this point. For the proposed boundaries, it's the dotted purple line. We kind of went with the natural boundaries of the river, and then Harmston and 11th to kind of encompass all those commercial properties. Go to the next one. So next steps, we're at the council presentation. We will then compile the final survey results at the end of December. Urban Systems, myself and my colleagues will submit a recommendations report in January to the city and to the BIA. They will have their annual general meeting in May, June 2023 when they usually do. At that point, they'll vote on the process. And then it will go to the bylaw adoption. You can go to the last slide. So this is just kind of a bit of a graph to kind of show the bylaw adoption. So it's kind of a two-step process. So after the BIA members vote on the proposed changes at the AGM, we will then update you on any changes to the proposed bylaw. At the same time that they have that vote, they'll vote in principle to expand the boundary. And then we'll go through kind of that renewal process as well. So this is when we'll come back to you with the next update and the proposed changes that are a little more set in stone. Are there any questions?
Excellent. Thanks so much for the presentation, and other councillors that have any questions or comments. Councillor Lee Morin.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering with the idea of expanding out, you're probably looking at less retail businesses and more service oriented and stuff like that, possibly. So I wondered in your comparisons, if that was the case in the other areas you looked at where it was maybe a more diverse mix of businesses. And connected to that question would be, if you were to expand the boundaries, how would you engage that more diverse business group? We have, there's a lot of special events downtown that really do complement a retail type business, but may not, have the same impact as someone further out. So I was just curious on your thoughts. Thanks.
That's a good question. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we can see from some of the initial survey results that these businesses that are beyond the current district are speaking to their differing priorities. We're paying attention to that, and we look forward to engaging them with further questions.
Thanks for that. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Thanks for the presentation. I had a question about your boundary extension too, and sort of your intentions on engaging those other businesses. I'm thinking about the businesses all the way over at 17th. There's a couple really large ones, and what your thoughts are at bringing them into the downtown, and if you've yet spoken to them.
We are focusing on the results of the mapping exercise mainly, and we can always expand bigger in the future if we need to. But we think because we've been at this 3-block radius for over 20 years, that it makes sense for us to bump out and continue to meet the needs of our members and adjust to the needs of the new members. And then we'll look at any possible changes in the future.
That makes sense. You're thinking incremental instead of all at once, all the way. Okay, thanks.
Excellent. Thanks for the question, Councillor Frisch. And Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I noted that you had only 51 in your sample size. Is there plans to try to really bolster that number by the end of December? And then is there a breakdown between members and non-members?
We have some of that data, but this survey has an option for it to be anonymous. So there is a percentage of members where we don't know where they're giving their feedback from, but we're just going to keep pounding the pavement until we hear from as many people as possible. We do have a wish to reach a 25% feedback threshold, and we hope to exceed that.
Great. And my second question, I did the mapping there on 5th Street, the little app, the scan the barcode. Thought that was really neat. The proposed boundary slide, is that as a result of that exercise? So the purple dotted line.
Yeah, the proposed boundaries kind of including everything, that slide, the member survey, kind of the city of Courtenay boundary, or what the city of Courtenay considers downtown Courtenay. It was easy though, because they all started to kind of align when we layered all of them. So, but yes, to answer your question, we did consider that as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any further questions or comments? Thanks very much for the presentation today. It's really good to get that update. I know it's something that has been kind of rumbling along for a long time, and I do truly appreciate the measured approach of sort of expanding a bit, having that conversation, and then based on the budget you put forward, basically if it expands and that budget goes up, the per member cost more or less seems like it would be kept the same. Or while, I mean, you're looking for that bump up, obviously, but then it really kind of brings that in there. And the only thing I would say is at one point you sort of talked about what that per member cost was, but not the per member cost with the new budget. And it might just be nice to have that in there. And again, the way I read it, it articulates in my brain nicely that if you double the members, you know, then it doesn't actually impact each member that much. But if it's laid out that way, it might be a softer way. I don't want people thinking they're going to have to pay twice as much or something like that, because I don't think that's what I got from there. But
yeah, that was one of the slides I cut to cut down on time. But with the proposed budget, it would be $450 a person or a business, which is still on the lower side in that kind of table that I showed. It's actually one of the second lowest, so it just bumps up Courtenay one place basically. So still manageable.
All right. That's again very much appreciated. And with that, there's an optional motion if somebody would like to not say what it says, but say what it means.
I'll move that we receive the announcement presentation.
Excellent. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thanks very much. All right. Again, that's been some great presentations tonight. We'll move into our staff reports. First one is substance use strategy. If somebody would like to. It's been moved in second. And thank you, Councillor Morton, for doing your best. And sorry, with that, we'll pass it over to staff. Is he muted? Oh, I do have to turn on your mic.
Thank you very much. Through CEO to mayor and council. So I'll give a brief introduction to our guests today. So in 2002, under the leadership of the city of Courtenay, various stakeholders came together to develop a drug strategy committee. The committee contributed significantly to educating people in the Comox Valley about substance use and the need to make health-focused choices. In October of 2019, the city of Courtenay asked the Comox Valley Community Health Network to broaden the scope and membership of the existing drug strategy committee to develop a regional substance use strategy for the Comox Valley. A multi-sectoral group of people from across the region was brought together to form the Comox Valley Community Substance Use Strategy Committee with a mandate to develop recommendations and actions for a fair and equitable plan to reduce substance-related harms in the Comox Valley. The Comox Valley Community Health Network manages this three-phased project with work plan oversight by the City of Courtenay staff and fiscal hosting provided by the CVRD for contributions from Courtenay, Cumberland, CVRD, and the Community Health Network. The City of Courtenay has provided $15,000 from a 2021 carry forward and $15,000 from 2022 funding for a total of $30,000 to support phase 2 of the strategy, which is operating from April 2022 to March 2023. So today we're joined by our partners. I'm going to miss someone, I'm sorry. There's Betty Tate, Sharon Karsten, Barb White, strategy coordinator Carrie Hackett, I believe Christopher, to present a midpoint report to council, which focuses on the milestones and performance measures for phase 2 of the Comox Valley Community Substance Use Strategy.
I think I'm going to ask you to do the slides. Okay, I'm not going to fight with that. So first of all, I want to say that we're really pleased to be here tonight to report on our progress on phase 2 of the substance use strategy. Thank you for inviting us. And I also want to just mention Councillor Cole Hamilton, Councillor Moran, Councillor Jollicare before he was elected, who have contributed significantly to our work. Craig did the work of introducing everyone for me, so that's great. So I'd just like to call on, am I reverberating? Am I too close? What am I doing?
It might be just a bit, yeah, it might be just a bit hot for the mic, so we'll try again.
Sorry, that's better. So I'd like to call on Barb White to give us a welcome. Barb is one of our Walk With Me team members.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for inviting us here tonight. My name is Barbara White. I'm descendant of the Pantanach people on my father's side and descendant of the Sapflute people on my mother's side. And as a member of the Comox band, I'd like to welcome you to the unceded territory of the Comox people, all my relations.
Thank you, Barb. It's been a real honor to work with Walk With Me. And thank you for providing that for us. And actually you can go ahead, slide 2 and 3. We've done that. So 3. And I think Craig's done this one, which is great. We could have talked. So basically this is the background of the project that Craig went over. And just the note at the bottom there, I just want to really acknowledge that even though the work we're doing in this strategy is way more inclusive than just addressing the toxic drug strategy, that really the people that have lost their lives because of a toxic drug supply, and as Councillor Moran mentioned earlier, a lack of a alternative that is a safe supply. They're never far from us. And just to point out that between January and August this year, we've lost 21 people in the valley, and that's compared to 35 people last year. So we're probably on the same trajectory this year as last year. And it's just always there. So I just wanted to make that point. And onto the report on our milestones today. And then I'm going to turn it over to Sharon and then Carrie to talk about our next steps. So next slide. Next slide. Who's doing it? There we go. Oh, sorry, no, one back, sorry. So the first thing that we were tasked with doing was to get some funding. And so we have secured 105,000 in funding for phase 2. And you can see who the funders are there. Basically, I can't read it. I've got it. It's Walk With Me, the Community Health Network. We got a grant from Spark BC, and we got a grant from the Comox Valley Community Foundation. So those are sort of the community participants, and most of that funding has gone to the work that Walk With Me has done, that Sharon's going to talk about, and then also the municipal and local government partners, and you can see the amounts there: Courtenay Regional District and Cumberland. Comox participates on the committee, but they didn't give any funding this year. And we're just starting to think about how we're going to get funding for phase 3. So that's on Carrie and my radar in particular. And then the next slide. And this was the big news. We were able to hire Carrie, who's here today, to coordinate this work for us. that didn't happen actually until the end of August 2022 for a couple of reasons. One was how long it took us to get the funding in place and that transfer of funding. And the other was that we did the first round of applications and didn't have anyone. So, but really most of the work of phase 2 continued, even though we didn't have a coordinator, because a couple of the network people took it on, volunteers took it on, and Walk With Me really took it on. And so we contracted with Carrie at the end of August, and we extended that. Instead of it was to be to March 31st. Her contract actually goes to June 30th, 2023, which we're really happy about because that gives us a bit of carryover into phase 3. And that feels like we'll start phase 3 in a good way and hopefully have some money to continue with our coordinator for phase 3. And I want to hand it over to Sharon now to talk about the data collection that we've done.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's an honor to be here and thank you for having this presentation. Really honored to be here with Elder Barb and with Christopher, also members of the Walk With Me team, and grateful that they stand beside me. They're not forsaking me today. Just really honored to have done this work in partnership with the substance use strategy. So the last time we all together met was out on the plaza of the art gallery, where we were honored to take you for a walk and to sit in circle and to have a conversation about the toxic drug poisoning crisis and its impact on our community. Really honored to do that work and to then partner with the substance use strategy on a phase 2, which involves looking at the strengths and the gaps in our local care system. So our team was honored in the spring of this year to sit with peers, people with lived and living experience. And we were honored to receive gifts of stories around the impact in this community and around the strengths and the gaps in our local system. We then we met with 50-ish peers in a series of 8 sessions. We then brought some of those key findings into our work with service providers. And so we were honored to meet with over 20 service representatives of service providing agencies. So today we're not here to give the findings of this work, but just to let you know that it's happened and that we are honored. We have received really powerful insights around the strengths and gaps in our local systems that we look forward to sharing with Mayor and Council in the spring of 2023. I just ask Elder Barb, do you have anything to add about the conversations?
Well, the conversations were wonderful to hear. A lot of the people spoke from their hearts, wanted to see an improvement in the support that we got, advocating for change in our systems and reducing the stigma. I felt like we were really supported in those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would say that it was a great honor and privilege to be able to sit with people and hear their stories and lived experiences of the gaps that they experience day in and day out, from continuity of care to lack of safe supply. It was a blessing. And for the insights into our conversations with service providers, it painted a very stark contrast into what my conceptions of services provided were and what the realities of what people were available to provide for our community. So we look forward to presenting those in the future.
Thank you. I think that's it for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for hearing our presentation tonight. We can move to the next slide. I'm really happy to be talking about the next steps that are going on. Am I clicking or?
I moved to the next slide. Is it the next one after this?
Oh, right. Okay, thank you. They all look the same. Yeah. So our next steps really are, one of them is data complete analysis of the conversations and the survey. And that is something that Sharon and her team are going to be doing. And they've got a lot of really, really good information that they will be going through with a fine-tooth comb over the next few weeks and months. And we're looking forward to presenting those recommendations in the spring of 2023, when we intend to bring everyone back together, peers and service providers, for a gathering and to discuss this further. Next, please. And one of the big jobs that I have coming for me is the transition from a committee to an ongoing collaborative. And that's really to create a long-term structure to oversee implementation of the strategy. And it will require a lot of conversations and figuring out exactly what the collaborative is and needs to be, and what their goals are for the future, and what really is the difference between even a committee and a collaborative. And we may not end up calling it a collaborative, it may end up being called something else, but really it's a collaborative of organizations that are like-minded. And the other thing that's tasked me is putting together the data sharing agreements with local data gatherers. A lot of different reasons for that. Again, a lot of conversations need to be had in that we need to know first and foremost, what type of data are we gathering? Why are we gathering it? Who's going to be the host or the caregiver of the data? What will be done with the data? So there's a whole lot of conversations to be had around data sharing agreements. But I think we agree that it's also important when we're looking at bringing this collaborative forward, it's important that we have local data to work through and to use for different funding requests or even for community education. And like Betty said, we will also be starting work on getting funding for phase 3. And I'm really happy that I'm here until the end of June, and I can see phase 3, getting implemented. Next slide. So our ask is a continued partnership with the City of Courtenay, the financial support for phase 3 of $15,000. We're hoping for in-kind support for the data sharing agreements and continued in-kind support for phase 2 and 3 planning and implementation, and the continued appointment of a council member to participate in the committee and the collaborative. And we'd be happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Thanks very much for your presentation tonight, and I'll put it out to any councillors that might have any questions or comments. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks very much to all of you for being here tonight. Much appreciated. I noticed that the contribution to the last budget from Island Health was less than 10%. I mean, is it strange for me to remark on that? Aren't we primarily talking about a healthcare issue here, and in which case you would think that Island Health might be the major funder?
Yes, but I need to explain that it's from the Community Health Network, actually, and the Community Health Network gets $80,000 from Island Health, and we contributed of our 80,000, 10,000. So it wasn't a direct ask.
So Island Health didn't actually give anything.
Oh, well, they fund the 80,000, but then we chose, yeah.
But they're funding that 80,000 for the work of the Community Health Network, and you chose to make this part of that.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So is there something that we can do to talk to Island Health about stepping up in a bigger way for this type of initiative?
I mean, it would be great, yes, but I also think it could very well come out of the service provider conversations and the collaborative that we're pulling together. We did make a decision early on in this process to work with the committee did, to work with community agencies and peers, and leave the larger service providers until we'd sort of figured out what exactly we wanted in this community. And we're kind of at a phase now where definitely Island Health is being engaged with, and some of the other, like the Division of Family Practice, the larger health agencies. So I think there'll be an opportunity in that too. We just aren't there yet.
Oh, that's good to know. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. Any further comments
Can
or
I
questions?
just, Sharon, do you have anything to add to that? Because you've been working with Island Health.
I guess I'll just say that we did have substantial representation from Island Health in the service provider conversations. And so we look forward to sharing that and to seeing what kind of bridges and relationships are coming from these conversations. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks. And Councillor Moore.
Great, thanks, Mayor. The voice isn't getting better as time goes on here, but at least I have a mic. I think just adding to the discussion about the funding, I think it is really important to know that I know the substance use strategy is beyond the toxic drug crisis, although obviously it's been a big focus because it's a huge issue. But I think it's really important to know that the folks who are impacted day to day, and also the folks who have passed away, are from the entire Comox Valley. Quite a while ago, we saw the call outs for the emergency services to go to toxic drug incidents, and there were some hot spots, but they were throughout the entire community. I really do appreciate the work of the peers, so vital, and in identifying the gaps in services. And I'm hoping that with the next phase, we can expand out more and get more participation from regionally and folks who are impacted across the Comox Valley. And I guess I know you mentioned that kind of advocating for larger system change hasn't been the focus, but I know that Councillor Jollicoeur has got some things in the works, but I really do hope that we can support the work in getting to those larger systems, because many of us know that there are huge gaps, and that's not to minimize the unbelievable work of our frontline folks who are really struggling themselves. Out of the folks that you listed, the people we've lost, I've personally known at least 2 or 3 of them, and I know many people have. So I just commend you for your work, and hope that we can continue to support going forward and to really advocate for the change that we need. Thank you.
Can I just comment that, large system change has been the goal from the beginning of this, as far as I'm concerned, and it has just been the process to get there in a good way, that is what happens, and the system change isn't defined by the system people, but by the people who are experiencing the system. And I think that's the work that Walk With Me has done. And I don't know, Sharon, if you want to add anything to that, but I know that Sharon's in the same place, and we're just moving into that now and working, as Sharon said, a lot of the service providers are there, and they are managers, et cetera, in Island Health, not frontline. And then when we go back to them, and we're going to hopefully get them to make these recommendations and say, our system can change in this way. But for sure, that big goal, I don't think there's anybody on that committee that wants this to be tinkering around the edges. Certainly not the network. So I don't know if you want to say anything to add to that, or.
Just to, I guess, to say that some of the most innovative ideas, I think, are coming from the periphery where there's more freedom, freedom to embrace the kinds of strategies that are needed in this moment. And to I think the strategy of beginning on the periphery is a good one, but now it's time to start to move into the bigger, to interact with these strategies, with these innovations in a bigger context. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to add to Councillor Morin's comments, and really appreciate that the Walk With Me team is here. And I just wanted to acknowledge that you mentioned the gift of stories. These are really, I think, important things to bring into our process, the political process, the strategic high-level process, because we can often get bogged down with data and numbers and funding. But these are real people in our community. There are people who are being impacted by substance use, whether family members or people with lived and living experience. And for those people, a lot of the change that we're looking for, and what I've heard from you today, and what I know you're working on, is it can't come fast enough, some of these changes. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that for those who are impacted every single day, that this is really hard. And so although we're talking about it here today, I just wanted to name that and to acknowledge your work in bringing those stories forward, and I'm looking forward to seeing the report in the spring.
Thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur. Any further comments or questions from council? Seeing none, again, really thanks so much, not just for your presentation, but just for the ongoing work. As has been stated, it's been going on for 20 years in this form. It's been going on longer than that, and just really, I can't speak enough about the dedication that I see in our community. So just want to acknowledge that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. And next we have the situation table and request for letter of support. And there's a recommendation, but yeah, we can let staff talk unless somebody would like to. Councillor Frisch, we'll get to staff for sure. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, sure, Mayor. I'll move the recommendation, and that is to support the John Howard Society of the North Island in applying as the lead organization in the formation and coordination of a situation table in the Comox Valley through a letter of support.
It's been moved and seconded, and I'll pass it over to staff. Oh, Jeff beat you by that much.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. Mr. Rushton, let's give a brief overview of the staff report, and after if you have any questions, he covered them.
Thanks through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So I'll give a recap of where we've gone on this journey. On April 11th, 2022, City Council received a request from the Ministry of Public Safety and the Solicitor General regarding the establishment of a Comox Valley situation table. As you recall, situation tables are weekly or bi-weekly meetings between frontline workers from various sectors and agencies, both to share limited information on clients facing elevated levels of risks and to coordinate immediate interventions. So at the request of City Council, the Recreation, Culture and Community Services Department conducted community engagement with our relevant organizations to review the current levels of collaboration, the views on the usefulness of initiating a situation table in our community, and the resource capacity to facilitate situation tables process. At the July 25th council meeting, staff provided a feedback summary from our engagement, which validated support of establishing a situation table in the Comox Valley from our key community agencies. Based on this, council directed staff to further engage with agencies who had identified the desire and capacity to lead Comox Valley situation table and to support a connection with the BC Office of Crime Reduction and Gang Outreach to explore opportunities. After several discussions and some fact-finding, Staff met with Angie Prescott, Manager of Community Programs for John Howard Society North Island. And after consideration and engagement with her organization, Ms. Prescott confirmed that John Howard Society, who manages the situation table in Campbell River, had the mandate, desire, and capacity to pursue taking the lead role in the administration and coordination of a situation table in the Comox Valley. So based on the report provided today, we're recommending that Council adopt option number 1 to support John Howard Society of North Island in applying as the lead organization in the formation and coordination of a situation table in the Comox Valley through a letter of support. Finally, it's important to note that once established, the City of Courtenay would provide support to the Comox Valley Situation Table through involvement of a bylaw services staff member as a participating member of the Comox Valley Situation Table. Can answer any questions you might have.
All right, thanks so much for the report. And first up, we have Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thank you, Mayor. To staff, I guess a few questions. In reading the report, I noted that there were other organizations that had identified potential capacity or interest in being the lead organization. And in hearing in discussion with the organization that we're being asked to provide a letter of support for today, was there any, is there anything you could speak to around other organizations that were considered? And to that point, has there been conversations with the non-successful or the non-recommended partner agencies in the community around the recommendation to go with the John Howard Society?
Thanks. Through CAO to Mayor and Council. Thanks for the question. There was one other organization that was considering it when they found out a little bit more about the lack of funding around staffing resources. They kind of withdrew their interest and weren't able to support that. There hasn't been a go around back through the other organizations through us. John Howard Society North is, and we're anticipating that they're going to be getting in touch with the other organizations. We did touch base with several organizations, RCMP included, just to confirm their level of interest once again.
And thank you, that's helpful. And through the mayor, my next question is more of a curiosity for staff in terms of in the staff report, the administrative implications is that there will be a bylaw officer assigned to the situation table. And I think that that's valid. I've been a part of a few situation tables and bylaw officers are out of all of them. I do get curious, given that the community has a lack of meeting spaces, if there's an opportunity for the city, again, through the mayor, to explore opportunities to provide a space for the situation table to meet. You don't have to give me an answer, but staff, that is.
Yeah. I can speak to when I was meeting with Ms. Prescott. She felt that Foundry had a good meeting space to start. Whether it's big enough, once there's more players, I'm not too sure about. But they're pretty confident to start that they could provide a meeting space there.
Yeah, it can be a bit challenging. I know we've got the Ukrainian support group that's ad hoc, and we ran out of space lickety split and have been going to other places like the college and SD 71, but we'll certainly be part of the conversation. So if there's space that makes sense, absolutely. Councillor Morin.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. I notice in the report it says NA for financial implications, but I know that our bylaw services are pretty maxed, and I just wondered what the impact is going to be to have a bylaw staff person pulled away for yet another task. Thank you.
Mr. Garber.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Morin. Thank you for the question. We may recall that when this concept was introduced to us, there was questions regarding participation, funding, et cetera. And at that time, the research that have been done and we've consulted internally, we do recognize that based on the research and advice that we've heard from other jurisdictions, that this is a useful thing to participate in. And if it potentially has a reduction or an efficiency for our bylaw services, then we see that at this point that would be good to participate. Just to clarify, it wouldn't be frontline bylaw resources that would be staffing such a situation table, but we are cognizant that we, notwithstanding the tripling of investment in our bylaw services area, that we are extremely limited in our capacity, and we'll be coming to council on that. But we do feel that, I think, as we have invested in the resource, it is giving us the time to participate in worthwhile activities and quite more modern bylaw enforcement departments that is important for them to do that. So I guess at this point we're confident in participation, but if it becomes a resource issue that would be, maybe something that would detract from our service, we would certainly let council know.
Excellent. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to acknowledge the staff in problem solving this situation. We were presented with an opportunity to engage in what seemed like a useful process, but the assumption was that the city could take it on. We rejected that. We reached out to the community, and we've been successful in that process. And so just kudos to staff for taking this forward and getting the result that you did. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And again, kudos to John Howard Society for stepping up to make sure that we can move forward with this. I've been speaking to our MLA about this ever since this was brought forward to us, and I've reached out to other mayors across the province where they've been using this process. And really the only advice that I was given is just to make sure, like, most of the organizations are probably talking to a certain extent already, but one particular organization, which is Crown, to make sure that they're also part of this process, because they're obviously an important part of kind of how things are kind of laid out in the long run. So, but other than that, glad to hear the conversation. We have a motion on the table with no further questions or comments. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. Next, we have the council procedure bylaw proposed amendments. So I think we're just going to sit and watch the slides, and then we'll get into the motion. And with that, I'll pass it over to Kate O'Connor.
Thanks very much. So through mayor to council, before you've got a set of recommendations today regarding amendments or proposed amendments to the council procedure bylaw. And this presentation is just meant to provide an overview of the role of the procedure bylaw, the proposed amendments, and then to answer any questions you may have. So procedure bylaw is basically your set of expectations and rules for how the meeting is going to be conducted. There are components within the bylaw. The pieces that are really important is that it facilitates collective decision making, keeps the tone really positive, collaborative, doesn't stagnate debate or the difference of opinions, and really to protect the procedure. That way everyone knows what's expected and acts accordingly. So these are the rules to playing the game. Sorry. So this really goes to the principles of responsible conduct. So in reviewing the procedure bylaw, I applied the same types of criteria to any of the proposed amendments to the bylaw around responsible conduct. So specifically including things like integrity, accountability, respect is a way of fostering leadership and collaboration. And those principles come right out of the province's procedure bylaw guidelines, as well as their forging a path to responsible conduct for elected officials. In a procedure bylaw, there are a list of items that need to be required need to be contained within it. Those are considered legislative. So those include rules for meetings, the logistics, the roles. So for example, the role of the acting mayor, the role of the mayor as chair in the meeting. Open and closed meetings are also governed by section 90 and 91 of the charter. Items that are not legislated that are very typical to be included are the process for making changes to meeting logistics, electronic meetings, which is brand new under the Community Charter and Bill 26 amendments. I'll go into a bit more detail about that later on, as well as digital participation. So why we're here today is I mentioned Bill 10. So Bill 10 is a change in legislation that came out of the ministerial orders that were announced or put into force during the COVID-19 pandemic. This really originally was intended to be a way of protecting participants' health while allowing for the continuation of democratic processes. This allowed us to have council meetings held digitally with electronic participation by members of council, staff, and participants that wasn't specific to a special meeting. So council's always had the ability to have an electronic participation for a special, but not for every general meeting. We have found in the application of the procedure bylaw, there's a general lack of clarity and procedure, and the language can be interpreted multiple ways. And just with changes in staff, changes in perspective, changes in interpretation, we do need to look at updating that. You shouldn't have to bring in a committee to determine what the true procedure is. It should be very clear at its face. Technology changes. So this is the addition of things like YouTube streaming, being able to participate digitally, those types of things, as well as we currently have exclusive language in regard to gender binary terminology that we're looking to eliminate. So as I mentioned, we've got the legislative changes. And this is really to allow us to have electronic participation as well as electronic meetings. It does talk about hybrid meetings. So you can have meetings that are where people can participate in person or have the option, should they wish to exercise it, to participate electronically. The reason why the provincial government went forward with changing the legislation was during the COVID-19 pandemic, they had a significant amount of positive feedback around being able to access meetings and local government processes through digital means. It meant folks didn't have to find a sitter in order to come to an evening meeting. It meant they didn't have to worry about public transportation. It meant that they could come in to a meeting virtually and watch the sections they were particularly interested in. So in hearing all the benefits that came through COVID-19 ministerial orders, they actually made a permanent change to the legislation.
Should we just let, I
I know.
think it's crazy.
Yes, thank you. So electronic participation amendment. So what the report is recommending is that council set the standard as the hybrid meeting with in-person and electronic participation options. This is the format that council has been running for the past year. We haven't received any kind of complaints. It's been working fairly well. And is actually quite consistent with how most municipalities in the province have adapted to the changes in legislation. So the proposed amendment would allow members of council, staff, meeting participants. So for example, some of the delegations from this evening, if they would have liked to participate virtually, they could, as well as the public. And that's more specific to things like public hearings. Viewing will be maintained through the live video webcast. Currently we're using YouTube, but things may change, you never know. And then participation using the virtual meeting software, telephone, and in person. So those were the three forms, in addition to written submissions that folks could participate in our meeting types. In addition to this, we've got a delegation of authority to the city manager to change the meeting type from a hybrid to electronic. So that being that all members are participating virtually. This is specific for circumstances that pose a risk. So it could be a pandemic, it could be a massive snowstorm, really because it's a non-political decision to make. It's a physical and or health threat or something akin to that. It's really important that that kind of stays within the hands of the administration. Next. Oh, there we go. So the next one is the annual meeting calendar. So previously, the procedure bylaw specifies what days of the week and how often the council meetings would be occurring. So historically, council has passed the calendar and then has gone forward to amend that calendar in order to make adjustments regarding regularly held council conferences or other events such as non-statutory holidays. The other piece for amendment is the location. So as you know, we're no longer holding these meetings in City Hall. It's not to say I'm looking to remove City Hall from a location, but more so to add the CVRD Civic Room, as well as saying alternative locations within the city boundaries itself. So this would allow council to have in the community meeting should it wish to do so. Meeting logistic changes. So this also delegates authority through the corporate officer in consultation with the mayor and city manager to change the start times, cancel or establish different meeting dates without a resolution. So for an example, this year with the passing of the Queen, we had a meeting before she passed. The date of her funeral service was on the date of a future meeting. So procedurally, we should have called a special meeting in order to pass a resolution to change the date of that meeting held on her service date. So this type of delegation of authority would allow staff in consultation with those two parties to make that decision. Another one could be if we've said something on election date. So you don't ever want to conflict with those items. Order of business, it's very prescriptive right now. You must follow this order A through Z. What the new amendment is saying is that we can put the agenda in an order that makes sense around efficiency. So you can bring delegations forward or presentations forward to earlier on in the meeting without having to amend the order of the agenda. As well as you can add new categories. So for example, we don't currently have a category for presentation or for awards. So it makes it really hard to add those things unless council passes a resolution or through unanimous consent to make an amendment. Public notice board. So just updating the fact that we've moved locations. So including the CVRD Civic Room as one of our public notice boards, as well as adding the website. So we do this already by practice. Considering we're doing virtual engagement, virtual participation, having a virtual notice board is also very important. Language, so as I mentioned, amending gendered language to be more inclusive. So this could be using they, them, their, or referring to someone by their position title. Adjournment time. So in the report, it references the public transit access. So essentially recognizing that if folks are reliant on public transit to come to these meetings in person, that ideally you can conclude your business prior to when the buses are no longer running. That way folks can get home. Some of the other reasons that aren't included in the report may include by the time we get to 9 o'clock, council has already been meeting for 5 hours straight. So it can be a very long day. And it at 12 a.m. Adjournment time, so you could go until 12 a.m. under the current procedure bylaw, is very unusual. I've really seen 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock being the latest, and that tends to be even with a later start in the day for the beginning of the council meeting, not even a 4 p.m. start. Updating the language for clarity. So this is all the small fiddly bits. So we have reference to the Municipal Act and not, the community charter. We have areas where the policy could be made more clear by a very small tweak that doesn't change the perceived intent of that procedure. So think of this like housekeeping updates, really nothing substantive and definitely not intended to change the way the procedure is applied. The next one, and this one is probably one of the most significant, is in regard to delegations. Oops. There we go. So providing clarity on restrictions. So a lot of these restrictions are already contained within the community charter, but expecting a member of the public or a business operator to know that not only do they have to look at the procedure bylaw, but they also need to look at the Local Government Act and the community charter is just unrealistic. Typically, corporate officers don't like repeating other pieces of legislation within the procedure bylaw, but this is really to be included as a general kind of more high level description of what the types of groups that can't appear before council. So for example, addressing a bylaw after a public hearing, that's a case law outcome. An issue that will be eminently before the courts. You know, we don't want to be having legal discussions in a public forum. The next piece is, you know, something where we've already designed a really big public engagement strategy. You know, this is more of an equity that everyone has the right to participate based on the engagement plan, and no one has a voice that is given more advantage than any others. Promoting commercial projects. This is a benefit to business, explicitly prohibited under the community charter. And then a delegation that has appeared on the same topic in the last 12 months. I did have some members of council, or a couple of members of council, ask for clarity about this after seeing the report. Really to clarify, this is to prevent groups and or individuals from coming back to council because they didn't get the answer that they wanted the first time. So an example of my experience with this is the fireworks organizations. When I used to work for the city of Vancouver, the park board was considering banning fireworks. Well, they submitted applications to appear at every single park board meeting for months, to the point where no decision was changing. They just weren't happy. They were filibustering the park board itself. So it's not to prevent, say, one organization from coming back time after time and providing updates on various things. It's really just to prevent those folks who are wanting to come for a purpose other than, you know, being a delegation. Next slide, thank you. The last one is, I can't think of the number of times after we've had a delegation come where at the following meeting comes, the item isn't under unfinished business, and the delegation is left wondering whether or not council is taking action. And then council's wondering, is it just going to be on the agenda, or do I need to bring something forward? So this really is just explaining that although you can't make a decision of the date of the delegation, that the process for hearing or passing a resolution is the same as what would be a new process for providing notices of motion. So that a member of council gives notice at one meeting, so that could be the same meeting a delegation comes. If you're very confident in the type of direction you're wanting to consider at the following meeting. And then at the following meeting, it would come up under council resolutions for consideration. So this really just clarifies it. And then it allows us to provide kind of a closure at the same time. So staff could then send notices, letting the delegation know of council's decision, whether or not a motion has been passed, or say no notice of motion is provided on that subject matter for the coming weeks, just simply send them a thank you. So they're not kind of waiting to hear. And with that, questions, but I think I skipped through the notice of motion slide. I can see council members nodding. So the notice of motion, or the change, is really just to the members of council are to provide a notice of motion verbally at one meeting, provide the corporate officer with the written version of the motion for inclusion on the agenda of the following meeting, and then the motion will come up for consideration at the following meeting. This does not change council's ability to waive notice of a motion and hear it immediately in the meeting, should there be an urgent reason to do so. On my slide, I do caution around anything where you're waiving notice. Basically, if that's the case, council's making the decision that the item is of such importance that it is worth excluding the public from, because you are considering business that no one has been made aware of that you're considering. So the examples for that would be things that have a consequence of significant delay. Items where you have to meet a deadline. So maybe it's a request for a letter of support or for a grant application that has to be in before the next meeting. Those are the types of things that would make sense to waive notice, because you don't want to lose that potential benefit. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to clarify, I'm generally in support of all the recommendations, but I want to clarify that your suggestion for notice of motions to be formally, I guess, set down in procedure doesn't preclude a council member actually submitting as part of the agenda a motion?
Yes, it would.
Why?
Our agendas are published on Thursday and the council meeting is quite close after that. Typically, well, at least my experience in notice of motions is the motion is provided at a public meeting and then considered at the next public meeting. Essentially, you could give the general idea of the motion at the preceding meeting and provide the more detailed resolution for inclusion on the following agenda. But if council wants to maintain the ability to just submit a resolution prior to the agenda deadline date and or providing notice, you can. The more notice you provide both to council and the public, the more time they have to consider it.
Well,
they may be aware that it's coming for decision.
Okay, the problem I have with that is that on any given agenda, we have all sorts of motions that come with staff reports or other matters, which basically have the notice of when the agenda was published. So I don't see how, if a council member has a motion that they've crafted, they get it in time to have it placed on the agenda, why there would be any problem with that.
Sure. Imagine considering our staff reports without the report, like the resolution itself in the absence of the report. It's just a matter of allowing council to have more time to do some research into the item. There is no staff report that goes along with a council notice of motion or a resolution provided by a member of council on the agenda, whereas for example, the report that I have before you today is 10 pages long. So it really gets into a deeper dive and tries to give you all the information you need in order to make the informed decision at your fingertips, as opposed to a notice of motion that often relies on the members of council to do their own due diligence in reviewing the information and the perspective.
Okay.
Right. Next, we have Councillor McCall.
Oh, thanks. I wasn't sure if I was next in line. Yeah, generally, I'm also really supportive of the changes. It's good to see some of these things that don't quite line up procedurally, just to be streamlined for, well, I guess a lot of common sense versus, yeah, some outdated processes. I also had a question about the notice of motion, how it relates to delegations. And I also find how we sometimes address a request from delegations to be slightly confusing, because sometimes it does end up on unfinished business on the next agenda, but not always. And I'm not always certain how it's going to be initiated. So I just wanted to clarify, like, say if we're using tonight's example of the Arden School requests around active transportation, would we bring up the notice of motion under new business and then request that it make it on an agenda as a proper notice or a proper council resolution at the following meeting? Or would we not address it at this meeting at all, bring up the notice of motion at the subsequent meeting, and then I think you understand what I'm asking.
I do, and honestly, it could be either way.
Okay.
So if you have something that's super straightforward along the lines of, like, say you want to refer the item to staff for a report back, that's a pretty simple one to provide immediate notice of, and then at the following meeting that would come back for consideration. If say, for example, if something is a bit more complex and you need time to absorb and reflect on what the delegation presented, and maybe, for example, with the Green Group tonight, they had a bunch of different recommendations. Perhaps your notice of motion is that council refer 3 of 10 to staff. You may want to take time to think about those more complex ones and then raise the notice of motion at the following meeting. So it really can depend on your kind of confidence in knowing what direction you want to provide with the information you had before you. Whether or not there's that consequence of delay again. And that's the other piece. So for example, we're going in, this is the second to last meeting of the year, right? So that may change your timeline a bit. Yeah, so it depends. Going either way is an option for you.
And then if we were to say, you know, if a member of council brought up something like, you know, something really straightforward, like asking for a staff report, would the expectation then be that that council member submit their properly drafted council resolution? Or would staff provide that after receiving the notice of motion at the prior meeting?
So if it's something as straightforward as referring and you can verbalize it kind of verbatim as you want to see it in the following agenda at the meeting, then we can just move that minuted portion into as a resolution of council. If it's more, I would like to provide notice of consideration of these things generally, and I'll provide the more detailed written version, then that would need to be provided in writing to the corporate officer in advance. And there would be a deadline for that submission that aligned with the agenda processes.
Okay, great. I have another question. Is there any, do you want me to come back in? Because I know that was kind of a while.
I have a little add-on to your for extra clarification using your example. Many years ago, about 6 or 7 years ago, we had the Ardent ambassadors come and present to us, and I believe we made a motion at that meeting for that staff report that we're using as an example. But because it was, I think, a super majority, like 2/3 or something, then or unanimous, and I wasn't sure if it was a majority.
This never takes away that ability. Council, through a 2/3 vote of those members present, can vote to waive the notice. So again, it's really what are the considerations of hearing something or considering something without the public being aware that you're making that consideration at the time.
Excellent. And I just wanted that to be articulated, just because even though we're saying this is our policy and procedure, again,
There are always exceptions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Can I ask another? I'll try and make this one shorter maybe. So there's also in the criteria of a reason why we wouldn't accept a delegation request would be for commercial purposes. We have had delegations before representing commercial purposes. I seem to recall Fortis coming and requesting consideration of LNG trucks or something along those lines. Would, in that circumstance with this in our bylaw, would there be some deliberation by council, or would that be a staff decision? I can think of other times like contractors being impacted by, decisions made at a board table or,
So it's not intended to prevent business owners from coming if they have concerns regarding bylaws, transportation routes, things like that. It's really to just entrench the prohibition of the promotion of businesses. So, you can't come to council and make a sales pitch. You can't come to council and on one item and then provide pamphlets and use it as free advertising. It's really limited to promotional items like that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Garrett.
Yeah, if I may, I think Ms. O'Connell has covered that, but it wouldn't be the first time that a vendor maybe wanted to bypass a situation and try and make a direct pitch to council. So these are just some safeguards that are in place. And again, it's been fairly well. I really appreciate the question that council is asking, because we have a very extremely rigid but very old procedure bylaw previous that we've been, in some cases, I would say handcuffed to utilize. And so, great questions in here. And ultimately, we're looking for some clarification and established procedures. And I think Ms. O'Connell is probably fairly able to answer pretty much everything that we have here. But if there were some specific circumstances, if council had some question, we are looking to update the bylaw, and then we could come back with some specific points. Just an idea. I'm not sure we'll be in any situation like that.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks to staff. I did have some questions that they were able to answer beforehand. I guess to the mayor, the list of restrictions for delegations, are those included verbatim in the bylaw, or is that a policy of council?
The list of restrictions, there's nothing in the bylaw right now that has kind of restrictions at all. A lot of these pieces follow with case law legislation, the community charter. So really this is, if you're a member of the public wanting to come as a delegation, it's just for their benefit to really clarify if they're allowed to or not allowed to by looking at a single source of information. As I mentioned earlier, it's an unrealistic expectation to know that somebody is going to come to look at our bylaw and then question whether or not there's another piece of legislation that regulates whether or not they can come. So this is just kind of bringing it all in one place. And this isn't the language of the bylaw. Like this is more plain language text to explain the intent of this piece. Bylaws are written a bit more legalese type.
Yeah, and that's helpful because, and we've spoken about this, but basically the bullet point that speaks to the topic, same delegation that has appeared on the same topic in the past 12 months. I'm wondering, in the writing of the actual bylaw, if we could potentially amend the word topic for information. Therefore, if we had a delegation coming and they were about food, but they have new information, they would still be able to come, which is my interpretation from our conversations. I'm not sure if there's anything to add to that.
Oh, yes, definitely. And my apologies for not being more clear around the intent for that one. Really, this is looking at those who would use the ability to appear as a delegation to essentially filibuster council or cause their intention of appearing is not actually to provide information. But for some other reason. So I can work with external counsel on the bylaw amendment to be very clear that it's not intended to prohibit repeat organizations for bringing new information or updates from coming. Great. But at the same time, with the change in the outline of the council agenda, the order of items, a lot of those folks may fall under presentations or may fall under awards or other areas because we're quite limited right now with delegations and lots of folks who may not actually fit in that category or place there because of lack of other options.
Thank you. And my last question on this, otherwise I'm generally in favor, is the language around time, council meeting schedule, meeting location, public notice board. So in the staff report, there's some language, rationale around the corporate officer in relationship with the city manager and the mayor to add a closed meeting prior to the public meeting, whereas it specifically only mentions prior. So, and I've shared this with some of my council colleagues around accessibility of meeting times. And so just wanting to ensure that we're not precluding potentially having closed meetings on other dates or after public meetings, because the language in the staff report uses prior to meetings.
The intent of the bylaw amendment came from the experience and feedback we've had from the past members of council over the previous years around not feeling like having an in-camera meeting at the end of a very long open portion allowed them to be kind of, fresh face when faced with some of the more significant or complex issues being faced by the city. It definitely, if you look at the past couple of years, we've had in-camera meetings happen after the open. We've had in-camera meetings happen before. It really depends on the length of the open agenda, how late staff anticipates that item is going to go, and then what is the substance of the items on the in-camera agenda. So, if it's a quick item where I just need council to approve a property disposition and it's a 5-minute thing, that's something we could totally do at the end of the day. If it's something that's very heavy, the council wants to do when they are as alert and as cognitive as possible, that the decision has been made after checking council member schedules to have the in-camera meeting appear before the open. The big target is to maintain a consistent start time for the open meeting, because the more consistent we can be with the open meeting, the less barriers to participation we have, because people can basically set their clocks by it.
Thank you.
And I'd probably just say, although there are times when there are going to be, again, emergency meetings called, emergency in-camera meetings, all those kinds of things. My experience over the last 8 years is all attempts are made to make sure the most amount of people can participate. But again, those are exceptions to the rules kind of thing. And it's really under duress where we have a very tight timeline or other schedules that we have to kind of work with. So, but yeah. Councillor Healy.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move that council direct staff to bring forward a bylaw to amend the council procedure bylaw number 2730, 2013, as per the 12 items addressed in the staff report.
Been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. And with that, yeah, there's a question of breaking, and we would normally be taking a break. Councillor Hilling brought up a point that there may be people waiting for a particular moment in this meeting. The people in the gallery, are you waiting for a particular item on the agenda? I'm sort of looking at the one on First Street, or are you just enjoying the evening? First Street. Anything else? Waiting for Godot. Yeah. If we get, if council will give me the ability to, we'll just bear the agenda to First Street if there's no objections. And after that, we'll take I think probably take a break at that point. So 6.3.1 on the agenda. And I'm not sure if we should just pass that over to staff. Now that we've Councillor, I got everybody lighting up here. Councillor McCollum.
I'll move that based on the November 21st, 2022 staff report, development permit variance number 2202-320 First Street Council issue development permit with variance number 2202.
Excellent. It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you. Through Mayor to the rest of council, Ms. Goddard is on here for questions if you may have them. Council sent this application for notification. We have a comprehensive staff report that's analyzed the variances that were in front of you, and the recommendation from staff is to approve. Nancy, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to that?
Okay, you're just standing by for questions.
Just standing by for questions. That's right. Through the mayor to council, there was one comment received earlier on today, which I'm sure you now have in front of you. It did concern some questions about some trees. Dogwoods are definitely identified to be protected as a condition of permit, and I understand from the applicant as well that the other trees identified in the public comment, a couple of Douglas firs in the rear of the yard, are also intended to be protected. So I think that answers that public question.
Okay. That being said, we got a motion on the floor. No further questions or comments. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes. And I believe at this point we'll break for a period of time for dinner and comfort, and we'll reconvene 6:45. That'll give us 20 minutes. All right, welcome back, everybody. Right now we're going to skip to item 8.2. That's under internal reports and correspondence, the fire department management report. Excellent. And we'll pass it over to Chief McDonald.
Just a short report. Thanks, Mayor, through the mayor to council. Our 100-foot aerial platform training is nearing completion. We are hoping to have it in service by the end of this month. Our 2022 recruit training program completed successfully in September on schedule. We ended up with 9 fully trained recruits that are now waiting to join the regular department. And we also completed our mental health resiliency training in May of this past year. So everything's right on schedule and pleased to report it.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. Are there any questions or comments from council? Seeing none. Well, thanks so much for the manager report. And yeah. Well, but I do want to thank the fire chief for inviting council and providing us a great orientation on our fire services and inviting us up to visit the training center, which was amazing to see again. And of course, being able to go up in the actual fire truck, the new one, the ladder truck.
No, thank you very much. Very well received by our crews. They were very happy to have you all there. And maybe in the summer months, we can do it again and get you wearing some gear and spraying some water.
Looking for some volunteers. Excellent. Yeah, we'll have some paperwork for us. Fantastic. Thanks again. Appreciate that. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We'll go back to item 8.1 and we'll just kind of keep going through the management reports. Next one will be corporate services management report. Been moved and seconded. And do we want to just go if there's questions, Mr. Garbutt?
Thanks through the mayor to council. This is high time we had these management reports in front of you again. Each one of our corporate services, fire department and public works have given an overview of their key actions. I think Ms. O'Connell's here for questions unless she wants to address any specific items in the management report.
All right. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. On to 8.3, public works management report. It's been moved and seconded. Excellent. Mr. Garbutt.
Mr. Shaw is joining us via Zoom, and there are generally quite a few items within the public works area, and I've asked staff to we also reviewed our most recent series of agendas for 2022 to update the management report to make sure that we're hitting the key items. And if council had any, we've kind of gone through this a little bit. If there's anything that council would like to see on that report, just please let us know. But like I said, Mr. Shaw's here, and I don't know if he wants to highlight any key items.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Are there any questions or comments from council? And I do have one from Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, great. Cool. Hi, Mike. So I had just 2 comments. One is that I'm really delighted to see the downtown EV chargers are supposed to be installed by the end of the month. And not going to say I believe it when I see it, but I'm really looking forward to seeing those. It was the beginning of the last term that we started that. And in terms of really impressive speed on things, I was just really impressed to see that the completion of the lighting improvements downtown is going to happen by the end of the month. As when you consider that resolution was brought forward earlier this year, that's quick to go out there, assess, plan, and then install. So, and I did have a couple of short questions. One is there were 3 new bus shelters. I was curious if you happen to know where those are on the system. And the other is perhaps a bit longer. There's a reference to a asset management 20-year plan. I was wondering if you could tell me a bit more about that, please. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's great questions through the CAO to Mayor and Councillor, Mayor and Council. I do appreciate that we'll likely see the completion of the 6th Street EV charger here in the near future. I too have similar comments. I also believe it when I see it, but we've been promised and we'll hold them to it. And hopefully that'll come as a nice early Christmas present, similar to that of the Urbaloo last year. It's kind of a theme we're running with a little bit in Public Works. So, but yeah, all kidding aside, it's been a long procurement process, working in collaboration with the RDN as the contract lead for that. And I must say procurement is a common theme throughout my listing here of delays, and that's no slight on that, but that's just goes to show the rebound in our economy coming out of the pandemic and the recharge and reinvestment in our community on all fronts. And so everybody's doing their best to try and accomplish as many things as possible within the calendar year. If I just jump to the transit locations, the transit locations was additional shelters that were provided through contract from Pattison. When we renewed the Pattison shelter contract, just pre-COVID, there was a commitment for them to renew the existing shelters and then add 3 additional shelters throughout our community. Some of those renewals sought replacement of the existing transit shelters that were supplied through us through purchase through BC Transit. So it was a redistribute of those existing and then replacement of those in their areas. We saw one on Lerwick across from the shopping center go in as an additional asset. There is another location on Fitzgerald right around 26th, which saw actually a solar station go in for the first one on the island as well. And then finally on 26th at the mall, just as you exit out the mall and you head towards Cliff Ave, there's one there now as well. So those are the 3 additional assets. So it brings our total assets up to 13 shelters around our community. So we continue to work with Pattison to help to grow and work with BC Transit and our counterparts at the CVRD to establish those service levels and continue to grow those services through our community. And then finally, the last point really about the asset management plan and the working plan. We have saw great success through the finality and the development of the water and sewer master plan renewals. This next venture project really is to take the ideas and the known projects within the water and sewer project, as well as our general asset inventory, and create a 20-year plan for renewal that will in stage to inform our capital plan on the future on 5-year increments, but really speak to the net deficits that exist within the assets and the renewals that are required to continue operating our system to what our citizens, residents would expect. And then providing real and tangible outputs for council's consideration for future growth and for future consideration within a budgetary perspective. The one key part that goes along with that is the sustainability model. So we're hoping to bring back in Q1 of 2023 a financial sustainability model the council will be able to review that speaks to the financial demands of an asset management renewal and refurbishment project. And it's an exciting venture. We've been working through some grant receipt monies with a firm out of the island. I can't remember exactly. Fit Consulting, who's done some pretty good asset management plans around our community. And I believe their most recent one won an award through Asset Management BC. And so we've been working with them closely to understand our needs as a community and then focus on what the output of that may be for council's consideration in Q1 of 2023.
Excellent. That was great. I don't see any. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. And Kyle, I noticed the Lake Trail multi-use path is on the list, but not the recent crosswalk and lighting improvements that the city did install up in the Lake Trail Arden area. Given the presentation tonight, I'm wondering, did we get those in another report, or do they not meet the criteria for this type of report?
That's a great question, Councillor Hilly, and I appreciate you bringing those up. They would meet the criteria under operational projects. The timeliness of those and the completion of those were much later in the calendar year, and so they got added to our work plan. After this management report was drafted. So to put them on and then put them complete felt a bit patting myself on the back or the group on the back, but they are in place. They are in place and in use, and it looks as though they've made it into some PowerPoints, so they've been pretty heavily used and accepted greatly by the community. So
Well, yeah, and I thought we had done a marvelous job up there for that neighborhood, and now we've got an ask with a whole bunch of other situations that you're going to get a request for another staff report through a notion of motion next week, I think. So anyway, thanks for that.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. Mr. Corbett.
Thank you, and appreciate you highlighting that, Councillor Hillian. These types of activities that you were talking about, they will make their way into our annual report and our accomplishments. But I would echo Mr. Shaw. We don't use the management report as just kind of like a closure list, but it is important for us to communicate out, and council was really clear in some of our discussions so far about making sure that we have those messages out there, because we do a lot of things just as a matter of fact. And when we go through our budget process and there's some presentations, council will hear really what's going on in the town itself over and above what we did with orientation. I think it's important to highlight these successes, particularly when there are public safety improvements that go towards our multimodal transportation focus. So just sorry to extend that.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And yeah, and you know, to the point of getting things done, again, huge kudos for some of those and I can never remember that new acronym, but the flashy lights that help people at crosswalks, you know, at Tunner Drive, up on Cumberland Road, et cetera. Getting those done, I think really helped, you know, improve safety for our community. So I just really want to thank staff for making sure those projects moved ahead expeditiously. That being said, any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? And thanks again for the report. Next, we've got the Heritage Advisory Commission meeting minutes. Been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments regarding it? I do often sit on this one. I did miss the last one, but we'll be talking about clocks and other things in the near future, I would expect. With that, all those, oh, sorry. No, Councillor Morin.
So this, just for clarification, this advisory commission, obviously they're bringing things forward to us in terms of their committee. So is there any way to go the other way? I guess I'm in terms of feedback. I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion about some of the ideas like heritage panels, et cetera, including non-colonial history, specifically around First Nations history in the Valley.
And I don't know, my guess is the staff member who normally attends those meetings, although I saw Nancy just put her video on, so I don't know if that, I'm gonna let Nancy speak. How's that sound?
Sure. Hi, Mayor and Council. The Heritage Advisory Committee could benefit from an annual strategic planning session, which we've identified for them early in the new year. In terms of council feedback into that process, I think that's an interesting idea. I'm not quite sure on the history, how that's worked in the past, but I guess I can just let you know that the pandemic resulted in them halting a lot of their activities, but they're very keen to engage and do things again in a regular schedule. So if you have ideas, maybe that's something staff can just keep in our radar of how to allow for that communication flow, but the timing is good, I would say, from their perspective.
And one of the things that I'd probably point out is, you know, Councillor Cole Hamilton was the rep for quite some time. I took over from him when his schedule had a conflict there. And so if you have information or suggestions, I can bring that forward. But even barring that, there's nothing to say that a council member couldn't come and attend the meeting as well. So if you had some information you wanted to share, Mr. Garbutt.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor to council, this is a committee that's membership is appointed by council through time. I think it would be totally appropriate to set up a workshop with them. As the mayor said, you're free to attend any meeting, but it may be that in this strategic planning session, council attending and hearing and talking, et cetera. the committee itself should be informed by our community plan policies as well. I happen to have been the staff liaison many years ago to this, and you know, they're a group of people that is interested and has been participating in many aspects of Courtney's history. So I think they'd be very excited to hear ideas that council may have.
And just as an example, having signs around the Fifth Street Bridge that sort of give a bit of history around the Fifth Street Bridge or around the river. That's something where I brought it up as a suggestion, and they were very responsive and happy to actually put some time and energy behind it. So yeah, so thanks very much for the comment and receive the motion. Yeah, I think it's already been received. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. All right, so we should probably flip back to 6.2.2, which is the council. Or is there more? Oh, was there? Oh, there was another one. Sorry. Yeah, there's a recommendation on the clock. Excellent. Any questions or comments regarding Councillor Jolicoeur?
This is the clock. Yeah, the clock. Have we? Does the city, through the mayor, does the city have a design for our city hall layout from whoever were the original architects? You know, the image that was provided in the staff report or the report from the Heritage Commission, you know, the clock itself is older. I would say probably an older design of what a clock looks like. And I'm curious if there's been given any thought. The commission has recommended that the clock be hung directly above the front doors of City Hall. And I'm just wondering from an aesthetic design perspective, if we have a professional opinion around whether those two things fit the current architecture of our City Hall and the City Hall clock.
Mm-hmm. And yes, they're not digital, but I'll pass it over to Mr. Garbutt.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. This has been a fairly long-standing project that was delayed with respect to sort of the urban design critique of that. We don't really have any guidelines that we would reference with respect to it. It does contrast to the pseudo-modern exterior of the building. Mr. Shaw's staff, who are look after our city facilities, may have some feedback on that as well. Kyle?
Yeah, if I may just jump in there quickly. Thank you through the CAO to Mayor and Council. A great point about aesthetics. That is in fact the original clock from the old City Hall that burnt down. And so that's a refurbishment of the existing to get the old structure working again. So design is what we inherited.
So if I may, the original City Hall was a Tudor stucco applique design, and so it does contrast with the exterior retrofit that we had done. And so I guess I would just honor the previous work that was done in celebration. But as I'd said, it's been a really long-standing project that's been delayed a significant number of times. So it was juxtapose the historical architecture, let's say. I'm not a design critique. I may be a I may be a planner by training, but design is not my forte. But I do think that it's I believe it's to juxtapose sort of where we are from now and where we were originally with our City Hall at the other end of the parking lot.
Yeah, just to pay that homage, and again, it's been approved by many. I think many councils and meetings and stuff like that, but back to you, Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thank you for that. I guess I'm curious if there is a rationale behind the location of the placement of the clock being in the photo I'm looking at being directly above, and if there's opportunities for placement elsewhere. My second question through the mayor to staff, in the commission's report, they had identified the contract for the hanging of the clock to be a private contractor. And in the staff report, I've noted that it's our Public Works Department. So I'm wondering if staff can speak to that a little bit.
All right, that would be Mr. Shaw, I believe.
Yes, thank you for that question. Again, through the CAO to Mayor and Council. You are correct, and so is the CAO. I mean, if I recap, this project goes back and it predates 2020 through COVID. The project itself, in terms of refurbishment, lied externally, and now the installation itself, the finality of it, in order to get it up and secured to the building, just requires a stamped engineered drawing for the actual appurtenances that will be mounted to the wall, and then for the clock to be mounted to those. And so that's the only impotence to completion for that particular portion of it.
You have a follow-up?
No follow-up and last, I think this is my last question. Thank you, Mayor. In the recommendation from staff that council pre-approved $14,826 to the Heritage Commission for their operation budget. Do we have an analysis of where their budget currently comes from, what their budget looks like, what their year-to-year operating budget looks like?
Yeah, and it's going to be pretty sporadic, I would expect, because it just depends on what they're doing. Nancy might have a better idea in articulating it, but if you walk downtown, you'll notice there's some wayfinding pedestals up now, and so again, we talked about the potential of putting some information things around the bridge and around the Courtney River. But maybe I'll let, if Nancy is able to speak to it a little bit better than I am, but I'm not sure.
Through the mayor to council, I can at least confirm that this particular budget request is from gaming funds from the past and continued to be from gaming funds. So in terms, and I think the mayor captured it well, is that the Heritage Commission works on a wide variety of topics and may influence certain projects that are happening, such as the downtown wayfinding, which would have its own funding stream, just straight up capital work. So it's they don't have a line item in the budget for their particular existence and operations.
All right, excellent. Mr. Garbutt, did you want to speak to Councillor Frisch?
Thanks. Well, I don't want to be a wrench in the gears, but I don't actually remember it being the placement of the clock having been decided in the original motion. Does anyone else remember it saying it was going to go back up on City Hall for sure? Maybe it might go somewhere else. That's my recollection.
We're going to reach way to the way back machine, and Councillor Cole Hamilton.
So I can't say that I recall the wording of the previous resolution. I don't think it had anything to do with placement. I know that there was discussion of perhaps having it projecting out of the kind of corrugated metal part of the front of the building, where it would perhaps clash a little less, and it could then be perpendicular to the street, so people driving in either direction could see the time. That was one of the discussions, and I don't know, it must have evolved since you took over the role. But yeah, there was some discussion among some members of the commission about sort of like this postmodern juxtaposition of differential styles, creating a new and transcendent meaning. So no, no one said that, but there was no discussion of location, but I could see it might perhaps fit better in the original kind of discussed location, just against that kind of corrugated metal piece of the building.
Yeah, and my recollection on locations is minimal at best, I would say as well. But I think my expectation is it was sort of something that would be dealt with through staff engineers and stuff like that to actually, first of all, make sure it's a suitable location, et cetera. So, Mr. Garbutt.
Yes, thank you through the mayor to council. I appreciate your conversation and questions. Ultimately, we have a recommendation that the Heritage Commission has brought forward and included for council. If we wanted any further deliberation, you could refer it back. It is a fairly long standing item, and I think a few people would like to move it forward. But we operate entirely at the direction of council. So if it's a matter that you'd like for us to review the location, I do know that it is a little bit challenging. Certain exterior exterior attributes of the building. The corrugated area is a unheated stairwell. And so it may not be that it's feasible. Unfortunately, we don't have Mr. Jerslet, who's our manager that looks after some of the facilities components, and our former manager, Mr. Seta, is no longer with us. So I think you might be able to provide a little bit more feedback. But again, if council would like to refer it back, we can just discuss or provide some stronger information as to location.
Well, yeah, I don't, I mean, this is the first I've contemplated the location of the clock, so I'm a little bit off kilter. But it also seems like the decision is going to last for a long time. So I'm going to leave it at that and let someone else speak up if they want to.
Okay, well, there's been lots of people. Okay, we have one person who's happy to leave the staff, unless somebody makes an amendment, then all those there, yeah, all those in favor. Oh, Councillor.
I mean,
Yeah.
does this report tie it to that location? Big staff change.
Well, the recommendation, the last line of the recommendation says that council directs staff to work towards installing the old city clock before Heritage Week in 2023. The motion does not, like it basically says that it's working with the heritage folks. So, Mr. Garvin.
Sorry, I want to preempt, hopefully it's not inappropriate to insert. We could advise council of some viable options. I think ultimately we're looking for direction, and then you'd come back in that regard.
That would require an amendment, I believe, but yeah. Okay. Yep, Mr. Garvin.
If I may, the motion says direct staff to work towards installing the clock before a certain period of time. There's in the attachment, it illustrates a location. Prior to installation, we can advise you and you can let us know.
Okay, and Mr. Shaw has been part of this conversation, or at least has been listening. And so with that, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Who knew it was going to take that long? All right, moving on to council reports. Oh, did we? I thought we did. Oh, right. Yeah, let's go back to, 6.2.2. Thank you for capturing that council calendar, and I'll pass it over to staff. Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Ms. Proton, do you mind just putting up the slide deck again to show the two variations? This year, like every year, I'm presenting you with the draft options for the 2023 council calendar. The council calendar, I've given you a recommendation of the consideration of moving council meetings to Wednesday. Looking at the stat holidays, the conferences, we now actually have a double stat in September or October because of the Day of Reconciliation and Thanksgiving. So the Wednesday is very much unaffected by the stats for the most part. The other piece too is part of the benefit of considering a Wednesday calendar. In the absence of amending the procedure bylaw to create a later release date of the agenda, council, the public would have more time to review the agenda materials. So we would still maintain the same agenda publication date, even though the meeting is now taking place 2 days later. So everyone currently receives access to the open agenda on Thursday afternoons for Monday meetings, not a ton of time, but it's very normal. But now we'd be giving them the Thursday access to the agenda with a meeting on the Wednesday. That does maintain the current net number of council meetings per year, being 22. We see that in the calendar with the little legend or key on the right-hand side there. And it worked out very nicely to have a balance of starting the new council meetings kind of mid-January and then finishing early December, but should there be items that arise, it still gives you time to call a late meeting as well. So this is what the 2023 recommended calendar is for the Wednesday date. Excuse me, and I have confirmed with the CVRD that this would be fine for amending our current rental contract with them. Should council be very attached to the Monday for whatever reason, it's not a problem. We also have a draft of the Monday calendar, should you wish to go for option 2. Adriana, can you show the next slide? Thank you. So this is an option. Just please note that this one, based on the alternating weeks, does have you with the council meeting on December 18th, and whether or not you want to maintain that meeting or potentially have a net loss or look at moving that meeting somewhere else if you're considering the Monday calendar. That's just something I would thought was important to point out. But if you can go back to the Wednesday, because that is the recommendation for council's consideration tonight.
And then on the Wednesday, the final meeting's on the 6th versus the 18th.
Yes, but say if it leaves you time that if you have items, you still have time to call a meeting in the following week.
Okay.
It doesn't normally happen at the end of the year, but it's always an option.
Okay, Mr. Garbutt.
If I may, thank you through the mayor to council. Courtney Council has met on Mondays for an extremely long time. We have been listening to what council has been saying since I arrived in the organization about providing access to information, providing adequate ability for the public and yourselves to consume these items. We take that seriously, and we've tried to incorporate that by being very diligent around our agenda deadlines, et cetera. I must say I did raise this with our director of corporate services, and there is another municipality in the valley, Comox, that meets on Wednesdays and have for a very long time. The feedback that we've gotten from the practicality of the agenda deadlines, the dates, conflicts or lack, and specifically lack of conflicts with other scheduled activities for council, suggests that it's very good. And you speak to other elected officials around, and I don't know if many of you speak to them that meet on Wednesdays, but I would say that this is something that I think we recommend quite highly, and really trying to go to what council has asked us to do. And we did hear some discussions around kind of access and enhancing the ability for people to consume the information. So I really strongly support the recommendations that Ms. O'Connell and her staff have brought forward. I think it's quite well thought out, and we could always go back to another method at some point. But I've always heard lots of things like this is why we do it, because of this way. And there's been a careful amount of thought given to this, as well as the revised Monday as well. So, thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Garbutt. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks. Certainly, I've been meeting on Mondays for 8 years, so it's a bit ingrained. But looking at the schedules, I could go with either one. So unless other council members have massive conflicts with Wednesdays, I could support that.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I was tempted to propose an amendment on the council procedure bylaw, that instead of mandating that we end at 9 instead of 12, that we end at 7. And
sorry, that's too late now.
And that was partly because I would like the meetings to not last as long, but also in anticipation of this coming forward. I have a commitment on Wednesday nights that has been longstanding beyond my involvement on council, that I will either have to miss entirely or stagger in late when this meeting ends at 8 o'clock or whenever it does end. On Wednesday night, I'm obviously not suggesting that council make this decision based on my particular schedule, but commitments that people make to community activities or things in their personal life are made on the basis of a long established schedule. I actually agree that the report makes sense in terms of advocating the change, but I will be hard pressed if I end up losing my ability to participate in this long-standing activity because our meetings drag on until 8 and 9 o'clock on Wednesday nights. So that's really all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian, and really a vote for more efficient, quicker meetings. So I appreciate those comments. Yeah. Councillor Frisch.
I noticed we don't have a motion on the floor.
We do not.
No one really. Well, holy gee, maybe Councillor Hillian should make a motion.
Yeah, I know for myself, I've been, pretty frustrated with the city council agenda or calendar since I first got on council, mainly because it just didn't make sense and we're constantly canceling meetings for conferences and stuff like that. So I do give staff huge kudos for getting it way better this year than it has been since I've been on council. I fully understand the reasons for not having it on Mondays. And I know I used to have staff meetings on Mondays and they got moved to Wednesdays for the exact same reason. Fully understand where the rationale is coming from. That being said, I'm going to pass it over to Councillor Moore.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know what Councillor Hillian is talking about, and it is difficult when you've got something you're pretty invested in to have a conflict like that. Is there, I know other council members have perhaps barriers or accessibility issues if we were to start earlier. I just wondered if that was an option to start at 3 instead of 4, but then I guess that prevents the public also from participating. So
there's an answer for that if you do you want?
But I guess, like I agree, some of our meetings drag on for sure. I mean, if we shave time off this meeting, how much we shave off, I don't know. I mean, everybody's, points are important, I think. So I don't know what you do about it.
And one thing that I'll just throw in there in terms of keeping our meetings times under control, and that's an option. And again, it would mess with the calendar a wee bit, but it would be having delegations on another night, because each delegation is a half an hour. So if you've got 3 delegations, that's an hour and a half. And I think we're pretty much on that today. But it would mean and it would add to there, but a delegation may be a less important type meeting. Not that it necessarily is, but I just thought I'd throw that in. Ms. O'Connor, you've got an
Thank you. So Councillor Boring, you brought up something that actually is quite exciting for me, which is the question as to the start time and barriers to participation. As council knows, you approved the creation of a communication strategy as part, to start in this year and moving on into next year. And part of that is looking at how people engage with council decision-making processes. And I can assure you that one of the themes of questions that will be included in that is how people want to participate in council processes. So coming to meetings, is it too early? Is it too late? And having done this analysis at the last 2 cities I worked on, I can tell you you're kind of doomed either way, but it's finding the best fit. So for some folks, they don't want to come at night because that's dinner time, the time with their families, that type of thing. Others don't want to come during the day because that's when they have jobs. So it's talking to our community and finding out what is the best fit or what are the different possible options to work from. That's really something that we're going to be asking. And then coming out of that, we'll see a bunch of recommendations coming forward based on the feedback. So.
And again, I think something that our staff have done a really good job, especially during the pandemic, but really ramping up the live streaming so people can engage right away and participate in a way that they wouldn't have been able to literally just a few years ago. So, but that being said, I do also have Councillor McCollum.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess just to participate in the discussion. When I saw the calendar, I thought, I don't want to change when we have meetings. But looking at it, I mean, it works so much better than the Monday calendar that's presented, that it's really hard to make a case as to not moving them to Wednesdays. And I guess I apparently I do like to resist change because I just didn't want it on a different day. I couldn't tell you why, although, you know, my husband is out on Wednesday nights with a different commitment, but you know, our kids are at an age that we can juggle that. But I mean, that said, if it does present issues for other people on council, I'm happy with the compromise of leaving it where it is on Monday nights. But I did want to point out that the Monday slide is missing. It's not an official stat on April 10th, but it is a day that City Hall is closed and there is a meeting on that day. So it is actually even one less Monday available. It's Easter Monday. We don't, the city it's open on Easter Monday after the Easter Sunday, is it?
No, you're right.
Yeah. So it's even one less. So anyway, I'm for the Wednesday, even though I don't like change. No. Yeah. I think that's all I wanted to say. Oh, I know. Also, I don't support moving the meetings any earlier than 4. In fact, 4:30 or 5. I think Comox is 5 o'clock and Cumberland as well. I think 3 o'clock is just asking for too many accommodations for 7 different individuals who are working other jobs and have other commitments that that it is set up as a system that is an evening meeting or late afternoon. So yeah, I wanted to put my 2 cents in for that as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McCullum and Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks again. Well, just as I was going to make a motion, you throw in your 2 cents and it changes how I think about the subject. But, I would agree that, if we went to Wednesdays and can pull our meetings off in 3 hours, I think that would be a good compromise, but I don't know if that's possible. So I'm actually just going to move that we keep our meetings on Mondays and see if someone wants to defer this for a month, they can do that. But that's my motion.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, it does need to be considered prior to the end of the year as per this procedure bylaw. So whether the decision's today or the 12th, you can't go really past the 12th without calling a special because there's also public notification requirements.
All right. Councillor.
Well, we don't have a seconder for that. So.
Okay, no seconder. Councillor Moore.
So if we were to have a separate meeting for delegations monthly or something, I think that would resolve the being able to end earlier. But would that be, that's adding 12 more meetings. So that might not be an option either.
Okay, Mr. Garrett.
I think we've tried to find a balance between the two. We don't typically have a huge rush of delegations through the year, although it would ebb and flow. I do know, council had some training from a legislative expert in Mr. Mina that there are healthy attributes of meetings that could make things go quicker, and we could be happy to refresh on that. Just trying to hear what council's saying. Actually, what I'm hearing council is saying, paraphrasing, is the meeting should go faster. So if there are Wednesdays or Mondays, be faster. And we can certainly try and do that.
Thanks for that. Councillor Hillian.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just want to reiterate, it wasn't my intention to thwart what might be in the best interest of the city. And if we decide to change to Wednesdays, I'll live with that. So I'll make whatever accommodations I need to make. As I said in my earlier remarks, the impact on what I do on Wednesday nights for the last 13 years aside, this does seem to be in the best interest of the city. The report makes sense in that regard, and I would encourage council, if they think it's a good idea for those reasons, to go ahead with it.
And Councillor Hillian, I think one of the things that I like about your comment, not all your comment, because you always say really smart things, but the fact that this might actually be a pressure that we have not felt before to make our meetings go faster. In all honesty, right? Because we sort of sit there and go, we have our Mondays reserved. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, thank you, Mayor, an example. This is my, first full meeting, and with an agenda coming out on Thursday and the meeting being on Monday, I did spend 3.5 hours at City Hall speaking with staff on Friday afternoon with lots of questions. And it would be nice not to have to bunch that into one day in preparation for Monday, and being able to be supported by staff. And I think to the point of efficiency, for me, both as in my other role as an administrator in government, I know that it is supportive in having opportunities for people to have background information if they need additional background information to be prepared, so that meetings do become more efficient and that we come to the meetings with everything that we need. And so it's similar to Councillor Hillian's point. I think the staff recommendation, the staff report on this made a lot of sense to me, and I'm happy to move the motion as stated here, the recommendation that council approve the following 2023 council meeting calendar with the dates below, and that council meetings be held at 4 p.m. in the Civic Room at Comox Valley Regional District Administration Building at 77 Harmston Ave, Courtney, unless otherwise posted.
It's been moved and seconded. I don't see any other questions or comments at this point. All those in favor? Any opposed? It's unanimous. They moved to Wednesdays and they're going to be quicker. All right. That's what I heard. We've done council reports. Oh, yeah, 7.1. So ABICC. Just receiving correspondence. Excellent. And just really want to point out, and I'll let people speak to it, but it's about call for resolutions and nominations. But with that, Councillor Moore.
I find that whenever UBCM and ABICC, when this comes up, we're often not prepared. And I don't think that that's that we don't have important things to bring forward. We're always kind of rushing, or we just don't do it. And so I would propose that we have a separate time to bring ideas forward, have a discussion, and make a decision on what we want to submit, rather than doing it on the fly in a meeting and not coming up with anything or doing something really rushed.
Excellent. That's why we're talking about it today, and it's not due till February 9th. So we have that time. And so with that being said, I don't know if we need to pass that on to staff. We do have some other lights here. Councillor Fritsch.
Yeah, well, I think the same thing. Maybe we just suggest we have a meeting, something on the whatever March 1st meeting that outlines this. I know that staff always do bring it up for us in advance, but maybe it's just a week or two too late for our, for our process. So maybe we can just establish that staff will bring it forward, a month in advance of the deadline. That gives us an extra meeting to consider. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and possibly even as an hour early, or as its own strategic priorities kind of. I think that's how I felt you were saying it, is it's its own thing. It's not part of a meeting where we've just said we're going to make faster. But yeah, did you want to continue speaking to it, Councillor Moore?
Workshop it, almost have a dedicated time to kind of workshop it.
Mm-hmm.
So that because I think that we all do have things we'd like to bring forward, but we just don't dedicate a time to really discuss that. Thanks.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is, I don't know that we need an actual amendment to say this, or if we can leave it in staff hands, that we'll get an alert, or we'll have a meeting set up for early January. Councillor Fritsch.
Sorry. Yeah. I was just going to say, if we're talking about adding another meeting, then I think we need to refer this to strategic planning to see if it's something that all of council wants to spend time on. And other than that, I'm happy to support the motion.
Thanks.
Through the mayor to council, you could just simply add a second recommendation that staff be directed to schedule a meeting to discuss ABICC BCM resolutions, or you could introduce it at our strategic planning sessions. But direction would be a good idea.
Okay. You had your light on a couple times, so but you seem like you're good now. Okay. All right, we've got a motion on the floor, so what I'll do is I'll just call the vote on that. All those in favor, any opposed? That's unanimous. And then in terms of having a follow-up meeting, I'll be chatting with staff as well. So if it, we'll sort of see what makes best sense. And we know we got strategic planning coming up as well. So there's going to be an opportunity to talk then. In an effort to keep moving quickly, council reports. Item 9, Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So yesterday I went to a gathering at the Weird Church to recognize the Transgender Day of Remembrance, and it's a lot of powerful words that were spoken about the violence experienced by trans people around the world. And that was particularly brought home by the shooting the night before in a nightclub in Colorado, a queer nightclub where 5 people lost their lives. And after the ceremony was over, I mentioned to the organizer the city would be happy, I'm sure, to raise the transgender flag in future years, along with issuing a proclamation. And I think the symbols matter, and sometimes something as simple as the raising of a flag can show respect and reduce stigma, and it can sometimes be the catalyst for an important conversation. So I'll stay in touch with the organizers that I met, and hopefully we'll be doing that next year, Cup for November 20th. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. Next we have Councillor Frisch.
And the only thing I have to report, and I think most of you probably already know this, is that I've begun meetings again with people in the Valley that are interested in cooperative housing, just to try and raise the profile of that particular model of submarket housing. And yeah, if anyone wants to talk about it in the future, just to reach out, and I'll attempt to pass on as much information as possible.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch, for that. Next, we have Councillor Hillian.
Mayor, I would just like to acknowledge that the inaugural meeting of the regional district took place, and our colleague Councillor Cole Hamilton, in a hotly contested election, became the vice chair. So I believe congratulations are in order.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian, and Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thank you, Mayor. This weekend, I attended a few events. Some of you were at the Moonlight and Magic, and I just want to share my congratulations for the Downtown Courtenay Business Improvement Association, the Comox Valley Arts Council, the Comox Valley Art Gallery, the school district, teachers, families, and community organizations and artists and vendors that came out to support that organization, or to support that event, I should say. It was a real success, and it was really nice to see many of you there. On Saturday, Eureka, one of our really important organizations that provides services to people with longstanding mental health challenges, celebrated an open house to invite community members in to learn about their services and to seek opportunities for collaboration and partnership in the community. It was really beautiful to see how much they do for people that really need those services with very little funding and primarily volunteer based. And I did want to just thank, I'm in my, I think, a month now in my new role as counselor, and wanted to thank city staff for really welcoming me at City Hall and answering all my many questions. And that's it for my update. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor McCollum. Councillor Morin.
Thanks, Mayor. Hopefully this was the last time I'll speak tonight. I just wanted to thank staff for a really robust orientation process and highlight, of course, one of the components that is near and dear to me, and I know the rest of council, and that was the anti-racism training with Jasmindra Jawanda. And I just wanted to highlight a couple things that I hope that we can discuss going forward. This is something that we're working towards, being an anti-racist city, and there's a lot of work with that. And much of that is having uncomfortable conversations as a council, staff, and a community. And some of the things we talked about were discussing the reality of the roots of racism in land use planning, which of course is very central to our work. racism in public spaces. Sometimes we don't realize the impact that certain public displays have on other folks, newcomers and First Nations folks. We talked about community engagement and dialogues, and this is kind of adding to, I think, a general theme of wanting to have more engagement with the public. Maybe anti-racism surveys, possibly a welcoming cities policy, and public art initiatives, again, is something that I've talked about a lot. And I think we can look at how we can better reflect the growing diversity of our community. And the last item I'll highlight is the food justice systems and food sovereignty, and being a member or being a representative on the Food Policy Council. This is looking at how we ensure that Indigenous populations and newcomers have access to traditional foods. Again, that touches on our land use as well. And how do we protect food and medicines in our forests and oceans? So I just wanted to highlight some of that work that council will be embarking on with the great support of city staff. And I'm quite excited about going forward. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Councillor Morin, for speaking to the anti-racism training that our council received. And to your point, I know council is looking forward to furthering that. I've just got a few things that I'll add to some of the other events that have already been talked about. I attended the Driftwood Mall security meeting, and very similar to the BIA security meeting, just talking again about security in our area. And again, thanks to the RCMP for attending. Also chaired the Island Coastal Economic Trust regional meeting on Friday. And today attended the Housing Central Conference, where the big announcement was the announcement that I sent to all of council that the province made regarding David Evy's commitment to housing in BC. So with that being said, next thing on the agenda is the rise in reports for council appointments. And do we even move those? Yeah, I'm just announcing. Okay. Oh, yeah. Councilor Morin.
We don't have alternates for all of the committees. Are we going to be discussing that at a later date?
And you're talking about
the external committees.
Item 11. You're speaking to item 11.
Pardon me?
Are you speaking to item 11, the non-RD ones?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm speaking to 11. I'm ahead of myself. Sorry.
There we go. We'll talk about that under 11. Perfect. Awesome. But that being said, I'm just announcing this so that we can actually get to item 11. I will given the fact that we're 7:45, I'll give council the option. If you want, we can go through these quickly to see if we can appoint those alternates quickly here, or I'm happy to follow up with council individually and discuss. I think it's a short list, but Councillor Frisch.
I was going to suggest we perhaps follow up in an email to see who would want these, and then we can bring them to the next meeting.
I'll send those out tomorrow. Okay, everybody's okay with that, and then we'll just bring it back to next. We'll defer to the next council meeting. Yeah, exactly. Or if you don't respond in a certain time, I'll have a time clocker or something on that. Okay, excellent. First and second readings. Oh, sorry. Notice of motion. I had that written in the other spot.
I actually have 3, Mayor, if that's okay. I know
we got all night. We just
discussed
one.
I discussed one with you. Thank you, Mayor. So notice of motion, my first notice of motion as circulated to council before the meeting today. I've been fielding calls over the last few weeks in regards to an urgent issue in our community related to the delay in accessing inhalation services for our community. We are currently the only community left on Vancouver Island without inhalation services for overdose prevention. We've had a few deaths in the last few weeks. And so the notice is simply that I'm going to be working with staff to bring forward a motion for supporting an urgent response to this need in our community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Number 2.
Number two is a notice of motion to the presentation that we received today from the Comox Valley Community Substance Use Strategy Committee on their ask as listed in their presentation. I believe staff have that. Who's in the PowerPoint? There's 5 bullet points.
Substitute.
Yeah.
The green team definitely had 5.
So I have it here. So the notice of motion, I'll also provide this to staff, but for next meeting for the city of Courtenay to continue to partner with the committee to provide $15,000 in financial support for phase 3, in-kind support for data sharing agreements, continued in-kind support for phase 2 and 3 planning and implementation, and continued appointment of council member to participate in the committee and or collaborative.
Excellent. And I think at least one of those things is already done through the council appointment. And number 3.
Many of you have probably seen in the Globe and Mail, on CTV, in the Comox Valley Record, that there is a new, really exciting fundraising campaign being led by the Comox Valley Land Trust and BC Parks Foundation. They have a very small window of time to fundraise the remaining amount of money they need for the Morrison Creek headwaters. And so I'll be bringing forward a motion at the next council meeting for support of that campaign. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. All right. Excellent. Okay, next we'll move into zoning amendment bylaw number 3072 for 1540 Willamar Avenue. Somebody can move that. Councillor Frisch.
Yes, I'll move that council approve option 1 and give first and second reading of zoning bylaw number 3072 2022 for 1540 Willamar Avenue, and that council direct staff to schedule and advertise a statutory public hearing for December 12th at 3:15 p.m. with respect to the above referenced bylaw.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. This is my only opportunity to ask the question. It doesn't directly relate to this item, but the item that we knocked off the agenda, it seems that we've changed procedure where we actually will schedule an item on the same night as we hold a public hearing. Is that, did I miss that? Is that part of our new processes that we've taken in? So for example, if we schedule a public hearing on this event for December 12th, does that mean that this bylaw will be up for third reading that night as well?
Mr. Carter.
Through the mayor to Councillor Hillian, we're trying to develop a path forward for a few of these items. It's very common where bylaws are scheduled for third reading following the public hearing. Now that hadn't been the case in Courtenay in the past. We have been hearing from council and various things about moving applications forward. So if council does not want us to do that, we can not schedule those things. But as has been discussed pretty extensively in the news and from the province and the new premier, we're trying to look at ways to be moving applications forward. If it is not scheduled for third reading, then we have another delay at around the table. So I guess we're looking at some options to try and provide paths to move forward a little quicker. Although I guess today something was removed from the agenda based on the feedback at a public hearing. I think we need to have some more discussions about that. I do anticipate, based on the, and I'll be distributing some notes from a press conference and a briefing from Minister Cullen, that these are some of the things that the province is identifying specifically as some challenges for applications to move forward. So, but we don't actually have any of that information on specifics, but we're really conscious about trying to provide paths forward.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. The comment I'd like to make is that I'm really aware of the appearance that what the public thinks doesn't matter to us. And I think that that appearance is heightened if in fact we make a decision the same night that we hear from the public, as opposed to having some opportunity to think about what they've actually said. I mean, I know it's true that sometimes there are projects that we've already made up our minds that we think are good, but I think we should always be open to the potential that something might change based on what the public tell us at a public hearing. Otherwise, why bother having one? The other thing is that we've certainly gotten used to the excellent job that staff does of consolidating and summarizing the comments that are made, which we then receive and get to read over again prior to actually voting on the issue. So I think it's worth us thinking for a little bit about, whether the getting things done fast is worth the challenges with both optics and time for thoughtful consideration.
Thanks, Councillor Helene. Appreciate those comments. Councillor Moore.
Yeah, I agree. I know that I brought up a while back when we were discussing the changes, and we talked about, staff being given the authority to waive public hearings entirely. I think if something's like presented as pretty non-controversial, we haven't had a bunch of emails. It seems pretty straightforward. I mean, we could have done that with a lot of secondary suites, I think, which tended to go through pretty easily, even with public hearings. I'd rather see, more of that happen than in something that's clearly got a lot of public attention that we don't decide on that the same night. And I think there are some other things that we can do to streamline as well. And I also would like to see us kind of respond to some of the perceived, I don't know if they're real, complications about public notice and stuff like that, and how to better help people to know what the process is when they, when they can get more information and that kind of thing. Because we do hear that at virtually every public hearing. Oh, I didn't get the notice, or there was a lapse in communication here, or, I'd like to see us take a look at that kind of stuff. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. Mr. Garvin.
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate the comments. With respect to Bill 26, you're to be receiving, likely probably in the new year, with some options with respect to waiving of, the opportunity that the province has said under that legislation to not hold public hearings. We are also eagerly anticipating where the province is going. So I would respectfully say these may or may not be issues that you may or may not even be involved in. So right now it is a little bit of a challenge in terms of those things and responding to issues that people raise. It isn't really the role of the public hearing. The role of the public hearing is for people to say we like the bylaw or not. We need to have good processes in place whereby people get notification should we have public hearings. So fair comment in that regard. I would say that we're going to have to work really closely with council to understand what these legislative changes, again, may or may not be, and then deal with the consequences. Because I did hear some of the public hearing while I was engaged in that conference call. And I'm not sure the province has thought about some of those implications and what the reaction will be to, proceeding or not even engaging those folks directly in that regard. So I really appreciate, and our council has been really involved with and cares a great deal about what people say, and they spend a lot of time in deliberation. So we have been raising some of these questions, although Courtney wasn't invited formally to participate in those exercises. There's a limited number of municipalities that have been directly involved at the table with the province, but we have been hearing some information in that. So I appreciate your take on these things, but also I'm a little bit where it's going to be difficult, I think, maybe to modernize and doing the air quotes of what that really will look like. So
yeah, and I was remiss not to thank Mr. Garvin for actually sitting on that meeting that I was invited to today at 3 o'clock to talk with the minister in regards to these changes that are forthcoming. However, the feedback I got was, they're still working through it. So really appreciate the comments. That being said, all those in favor? Any opposed? Oh,
And are we considering right now?
yeah.
Which motion are we considering? Are we Willamar here?
12.1.1.
Right, I have some comments on this.
Okay.
The comments were regarding the other, was regarding process. I have some comments specifically to this
Okay.
motion.
Sure.
Sorry.
Do you want to make them now then?
Sure.
It's better to do it before we take the vote.
We are on bylaw number 3072, correct? Yep. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
It's all good.
I've met with staff on this, so I just want to share my appreciation for the time spent with me on Friday to answer my questions. I did note a discrepancy between the submission from a interested community member that was dated September 11th, 2022, and in the staff report, and it's speaking to flood mitigation and water retention on the property. And in the staff report, it shows that the permit that was provided for the cottonwood trees that is referred to in the public comment was provided to the applicant in May of this year. And so wondering, Mayor, through you, staff can kind of speak to the trees on the property, the kind of discrepancy between what the public is communicating in this email here from September 11th and what the permits provided for tree cutting permit for those cottonwoods.
Mr. Garvin.
I'll ask Ms. Goddard to speak if she can to the question from Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, through the mayor and council. I'm I'm also looking at the comment you must have before you on page 15 from a member just talking about that, yes, some drainage concerns on the subject property and that it has many large cottonwoods that provide a number of benefits or values, urban sponge, etc. And it sounds like Councillor Jolicoeur, you're asking about if just the timing of kind of that comment and if the permissions to remove it already occurred in the spring. How's maybe the person asking about trees in September? Is that your question?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So I think staff probably look forward to providing at some point a briefing on our tree bylaw. I know it's got a few nuances in it that maybe help explain here. So properties under an acre in our tree bylaw do not require a tree cutting permit, provided that they achieve the tree density target for this property, I believe is 10, the 1540. So what would have happened back in spring is the developer asked staff at the time, do I need a permit? I'm doing some other clearing on this more southern property adjacent, the two properties owned by the same owner. And because of the way the tree bylaw is structured, they could remove some of their trees without a permit and then still retained some. And that's what you see today is some of them being retained. And so I'm going to assume that that is why someone's asking about trees, even though some clearing was already permitted. I will point out, it mentions in the staff report, the ultimate fate of the tree density target and how it will be achieved on 1540 is not yet determined. We do expect that they will have to obtain a tree cutting permit and remove some of the trees that are already there, just given where the building envelopes are desired to be and the servicing. And that is entirely acceptable in the tree bylaw for properties under an acre. They may meet their tree density target however they wish, whether that be retention, planting, or cash in lieu. So the developer has has been diligent in checking the city's regs on trees, and so far they've been following them. And I hope that clarifies.
It does. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Excellent. All right. That being said, call in a question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes. And we are adjourned. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Frisch.
Yeah. So 12.2 was on our agenda.
12.2.1.
Do we make a motion to defer it or did we just say it disappears? Like, I want to be clear on the process.
So at the beginning of this meeting, I
mentioned
said,
that we were
I'm
gonna-
changing this unless somebody has an argument against that. Nobody had an argument. And
I apologize,
therefore,
I missed
yeah,
that.
no, it's all good. It was meant to be expedient, but of course, there are trade-offs if we go too quick. So I'll try to, if we make changes like that in the future, I'll be a little bit more articulate maybe. And I know we had spoken about it a little bit during the actual public hearing
And
as
obviously
well.
raised a larger question. So maybe
Mhm.
discussion for next meeting anyways.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
You guys, your turn.
We are